All right, we are live. Good morning, everybody. This is my second morning of trying to do live streams, and I have just come in from doing chores, so I look like a farmer. All right, I wanted to talk about dry goods today. Now, the title of this, I think I did dry goods, food storage, and then emergency and real life preparedness. Now, the reason I say that is because having bulk goods and having dry goods is a budget saver. Having dry goods on hand so that you're not running to the grocery store for last minute things, having dry goods on hand so that if you have a week or a month where money is really tight, having things like this on hand means that you have your basics covered and you don't have to break your budget on, during dry times. Hold on a second. I forgot to turn off the fan for the wood stove. All right. Sorry about that. Hey, Scratch Maid. How are you? And Jeremy and Andrea. Good morning. Good morning. All right. So I wanted to start off just tomorrow. I wanted to talk more about containers, but in order to show you my food storage, that is my dry goods, I kind of have to show you my containers. So I save jars. If we have something we buy at the grocery store, then I save the jar. This is not a canning jar. This is just a regular old. I think this one actually came from one of my Airbnbers. I think it's because I don't buy this kind of thing. I think it was a spaghetti sauce jar. And then I have a canning jar. And then I have, John likes to buy nuts for work. And so I save these. These are actually nicer than canning jars because they're square. When you put them in your cupboards, they fit in more compactly than a round jar. So I really like these. These are great. So those are some of my containers. And then Carolina and Barbara and let's see. Andrea says she's been freezing. Yeah, I do the same thing. If I have something that was ground, I wonder if I have one here. I don't think I have one here. If I have something that is a flour, I freeze it. And that's because it keeps, once the germ gets crushed on a seed, it can go rancid very quickly. Do you have eggs? Okay, put it on the counter and then go work on something else out there, okay? All right, so this is the 5-gallon bucket lid that I told you guys about yesterday. Let's see if I can not make a mess. I really wanted to show this to you guys, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. So when we buy a 50-gallon, when we buy a bulk bag of some kind of dry goods, this time it was oatmeal. It was a 20, maybe a 30-pound bag of oatmeal. What we do is we put it inside Ziploc bags, and then we put it inside of a 5-gallon bucket. So I'll try and show that to you really quick. All right, so here's the 5-gallon bucket. And then inside it's full of these. And the reason that if I have a 50-pound bag or a 20-pound bag, usually those come in paper bags or plastic bags, and those can be punctured pretty easily. Or if you have a flood, and if they're in those big paper bulk bags, if you have a flood, the moisture gets to them. So by putting them in a Ziploc bag and then putting them in a 5-gallon bucket with the lid on, it means that they are double protected. And by having it in a small plastic bag, it means your kids can go down and grab oatmeal for you out of the bucket, and they're not measuring anything, they're not scooping anything. And so you're not getting, say for instance, this was sugar. If you had sugar in your basement in little plastic bags like this, your kid just has to go pick it up and take it upstairs. If they're having to reach in and scoop things and measure things, you're going to get sugar on the floor, and it's going to attract ants. If you have grain on the floor or oatmeal on the floor, it's going to attract mice. So this is the bulk of our food storage that's dry goods is stored like this. So I do the same thing with things like spaghetti. We can't eat regular wheat flour. So these are Asian noodles, honey. So these are Asian noodles. They're made out of sweet potato flour, and it's what we can eat for noodles. And we will just stick a 5-gallon bucket full of these, and that's about a 6-month supply, maybe even a year's supply of noodles for us. But we leave them in the original package, and we just pop it in the 5-gallon bucket and put the lid on. And that way kids can't destroy it. Good morning, Jennifer. Let's see, Susan is here. I think I said hi to everybody else. So another thing I wanted to talk about, if you have a hard time eating dry goods, but you can eat sprouts, you can have your sprouting seeds in bulk, and they count as dry goods, even though you're going to sprout them later. So I have mung beans and peas here, and they count as dry goods. The other thing is, sorry, COVID lung. One of the things that is important to know is that a lot of your bulk goods that you can get in the grocery store will actually sprout, and you can plant them. And so in a pinch, if you were in trouble and you didn't have all of the seeds that you needed, you can take, for instance, where's one that I have? Beans. Like if you have bulk beans, you can actually take those beans and use them in your garden and plant them for your garden. So as long as the germ hasn't been destroyed, as long as your product is a seed and it hasn't been crushed, usually you can use those as seeds in your garden. And that's what I do with beans. I just get like a 50-pound bag of beans. And then if I'm low on my bean seed in the garden and I don't want to spend like $5 for a tiny little packet of seeds, I just go plant those beans. So they're multi-purpose. Things like the lentils, these I believe have been split. It says on the package, split peas. Well, split peas aren't going to grow because they have been opened up and split. When they're split, it kills the germ, which is the part that sprouts. So not all things that you buy in bulk will work as garden seed, but a lot of them will. Pardon me. Hello, Joyce. Joy of the Garden, hello. Jeremy, good to see ya. Okay, so the next thing in my dry goods would be dried fruit. This is dried pineapple that we got in bulk. I save it for the girls' granola. And then I have, again, this is a nut container that John used because he works from home and he likes to have snacks downstairs when he's working. And so I saved these square containers from his nuts. And this one has raisins in it. And then we get bulk spices. And then we put them in glass jars. The majority of everything stays in the basement. Large quantities stay in the basement. And then I just bring them up in smaller quantities like this. This one is nutmeg. And but I try really hard not to leave things inside plastic unless it's also inside a bucket. For one thing, I don't know if you can see that little hole. That hole is so that the package can breathe. But if you have moisture in the air, moisture will get in through that hole. So I take something that is in plastic and I put it in a bucket. And if it's a small quantity, or if it's an unsealed package, like for instance, this is what some of the girls' flour comes in. I save these bags and I can put dry goods in them that were in bulk, and then I can put it in a 5-gallon bucket. So I save this kind of thing, which I know is weird. Let's see. For my homemade stuff, I do them as dry goods too. These are peppers that I dried. And I will keep one of these jars upstairs in the kitchen so I have it for easy use, but the rest of them go in the basement where it's cool. So let's see what people, is anybody asking any questions? Okay, good morning, Robert 5109. And okay, so there's dry goods. I really like to have at least 6 months of dry goods. A year is great. Places that you can get containers for your dry goods are just save all your glass jars. Glass jars are better than plastic because you can sterilize them. For less long-term storage, for pantry storage upstairs, I will use plastic. if it's nice and square and really uniform. But again, small amounts upstairs because the heat can age your food quickly. You want to keep it as cool as possible. A great place to store dry goods is under beds. You can get a Rubbermaid tote, and you can put glass jars and other things in the Rubbermaid tote and put it under your bed with a lid on, and that's another layer of protection against rodents, against sunlight, against oxygen. And so if you don't have a basement, probably the coolest place in your house is going to be under your beds. And when we didn't have a basement, when we first got married, I stored all of our food storage under the bed, especially the heavy stuff. You don't really want to be storing a lot of glass and really heavy jars up in closets, because if you had an earthquake or if you had a child climbing on things, they could get really hurt. So heavy items always go under the bed. Let's see. Andrew said, I have peppers and tomatoes from recent purchases. They weren't organic or particularly special, except for their high germination rate. I have loads of seedlings. It's kind of that time of year, isn't it? Michigan lady said, is there anything I should do or can do to keep kitchen moths away? Kitchen moths away? Is that what you're saying is kitchen moths? Kitchen moths. I have had, are you talking about the kind of triangular looking little ones? Their wings fold down all the way? Tell me if that's what you mean. Hobby Woodworker said, get 1 gallon glass jars, pretty cheap by buying large jars of dill pickles. Exactly. If you or your family like dill pickles, even better. But if not, you get a 1 gallon glass jar. So I have a sister who was on food stamps for a short amount of time. Her husband was in school. I think they had 3 kids, and she had to be on food stamps for a short amount of time. And what she did is she bought food storage with her food stamps. And I would say most people have enough, even just condiments and convenience food stuff that they buy, that they can really get a lot of glass jars. I would say always get glass if you have an option. Don't get plastic. The reason for that is that glass jars can be sterilized. And because of that, you're not going to have odors and everything in your jars. And the other thing is, a lot of times in a dishwasher, something like this is going to melt if you try to sterilize it. Now, I do use these a lot, and I really like them, but I use them because they're already in the house. John buys them very frequently, and they work great for stacking. I only use them for dry goods so that I can not have to run them through a dishwasher. Plastic has a tendency to hold on to not only flavors, but bacteria. And you can get really nasty things growing in plastic if you don't treat it right. Whereas with glass, you sterilize it and it's all great. I don't generally buy food. I have done it before, though, I have to admit. But we really like pickles. If you don't like pickles, find some kind of large jar. Don't waste the pickles. I'm trying to think. I mean, if you have pigs, I guess you could do that. And yes, a big glass jar that you buy with pickles in it is actually probably going to be cheaper than a specially bought. Like, you can get gallon jars that are like canning jars. You can get 2-quart jars, but they can be quite pricey. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Double dip, buy something you like to eat, knowing that you're going to keep the jar because you really like the jar. All right, let's see. 360 Eagle, I said, beautiful woman. Thank you so much, from South Africa. I feel like I look like a farmer this morning. Andrew said, I've had the moth issue bad once from dog treats I neglected. I must repackage everything in glass or plastic jars. Yes. So my moths that I have a hard time with came in with wool. They were wool moths, but I have seen them in other people's kitchens, in places where there's not enough sunlight, where things don't get aired out enough, and where there's a lot of like textile stuff. So they can hide and live in laundry. Those kind of moths hide and live in textile things. And then, yes, they can get into other things. They can get into your food. They can get into your cupboards and things like that. Sometimes like fly strips will help with that, but mostly what really helps is just getting into your cupboards and keeping dust and clutter down. They really thrive on clutter. And so having everything in jars and then making sure that maybe once a week you go in and wipe around any spills and get it out, which I know is a pretty tall order, but it's pretty much the only way to get rid of them is to get rid of, like, not even just clutter in the spaces that you use a lot, but in clutter in, like, in spaces that you don't use a lot. Like for me, that would be like my drawers where I keep my washcloths and stuff, because they like textiles, they like dust, they like dark places. And we did have quite a problem with them there for a little bit, like I said, because we had some mold that came in and was contaminated, and then they got into some other things. Pardon me. Andrea said they're tattered light tan. Yeah, exactly. My grandma, when she was living in her house and it was too big for her to keep 100% all drawers opening all the time. The drawers that she didn't open very much is where they became infested, and she had quite a few in her house. The drawers where she was in the drawer a lot and moving things around, it wasn't a problem. All right. Joyce said moths on Amazon, Dr. Killigan's pantry moth traps, 20 traps. Yeah. I don't really like to have stuff like that in my kitchen. I don't know. Do they have poison on them? I would say for me, like a really good spring cleaning and then cleaning again in the fall just before I do like my food storage type stuff helps eliminate that kind of thing. Because sometimes I think we just forget about our little nooks and crannies and corners. I know I do anyway. Hobby Woodworker said all plastic off-gases chemicals over their entire life and slowly grow brittle with age. Glass lasts almost forever until you drop it. Yes, exactly. Plastic does off-gas. That is true. It doesn't off-gas as much into something that is a dry good. Plastic definitely off-gas faster into a liquid than it does into something like this, especially if you keep it cool. So I think plastic has its place in a lot of things. I love having a greenhouse that's covered in plastic, et cetera, et cetera. But I agree with food. You want to be a little more careful with plastic. All right. Andrea said, I freeze my goods so there's minimal chance of new larvae entering my home. Yeah, and I do the same thing. But again, I guess I already said that. When I have something that is a flower, I instantly freeze it. And the reason for that is that when your germ gets crushed into flour, the germ in the seed gets crushed, that's when you get rancidity. So if instead of having a wheat grinder or a grain grinder, if instead you buy flowers, you want to put them in the freezer immediately to prolong their shelf life. So Michigan lady said, yes, my darn autocorrect, right? Susan said, we haven't started our garden yet. It's too cold outside. Holly, New York. So I have started my garden like 3 times now. And last year, I didn't start my garden as early as I wanted to. I started it in the beginning of March. I like to start it in January because I have the hotbeds which heat up and are great. This year, we were really struggling with just illness. And so even though I got it started and it was going great, it didn't get covered one night and it died. Once again last night, even though it's in the hotbed in the greenhouse, it didn't get covered. But now instead of sweet potatoes out there, all I have is greens. And so they were probably fine last night. But what I had planted in February was sweet potatoes, and they were doing great until I didn't cover them one night. So that's too bad. All right. So while we're talking about dry goods, I do want to go back to seeds. Because I plant frequently and we feed ourselves 100%, all of our vegetables come from the garden during the summer. And also we feed our animals a lot, like 75% of the food for the animals comes from the garden in the summer. I don't, so this is a bad example because this is split peas. You couldn't actually use this, but let's find one that I could. So these are mung bean seeds. So I buy my garden seeds in pound amounts. I don't buy them in packets. I buy them by the pound. I get them from Main Street Seed and Supply. They're non-GMO. And I buy them by the pound. And I have probably 3 apple boxes of seeds. And the reason for that is because then I can plant indiscriminately whenever I want to plant. And it only costs me like $6, for this much seed because I got it in bulk. And I will say I've had some oopses there. Last year when I was planting watermelons, it turned out I was planting squash. because they sent me the wrong seed on that one, but that's the only time it's happened. But again, certain dry goods can be used as seeds. And so my garden seeds and my food storage kind of go back and forth that way. I could go out and plant these mung beans and they would turn into beans. These sprouting peas, I could plant these peas and they turn into peas, and then I could save the seeds. And if you have a place to get bulk dry goods, that is a great place to kind of double up on things. Is that when you buy your beans, just know that you could also use those as seeds, and you spent maybe like $25, $35 on this 25-pound bag of food, and that's a lot cheaper than what you can get it as seed from a garden store. And so just keep that in mind, is that when you're thinking dry goods, really think outside the box. Instead of buying little packages of granola, I buy all the ingredients for granola. I have pumpkin seeds. I have dried fruit. I have the oatmeal. I have well, it doesn't have any in it. Nuts. I have the nuts. And that way, when I want to make something, instead of having a whole bunch of little packages of granola, I have a whole bunch of big buckets full of the ingredients for granola. And then if I just want to make oatmeal, or if I want to make oatmeal cookies, I can still pull oatmeal out without it actually being granola that I don't really want to use in oatmeal cookies. Or I can be making cookies or some kind of cake and use my dried pineapple, but it isn't all in granola. I have all my individual ingredients always on hand, and it's a lot cheaper to buy bulk single ingredients than it is to buy pre-made finished ingredients, if that makes sense. Let's see. Andrea said, I'm growing in old containers like milk cartons, yogurt, etc., with a hole in the bottom lids to collect the drainage. Yes, and I've done the same thing. I do that with I do that when I start fruit tree cuttings. When I'm starting new plants, I really do like to use yogurt containers. We also use it as animal feed scoops, so we really don't throw anything away. Pardon me. 360 Eagle, I said dry goods. We bash air out of the buckets, place 2 candles, also storing, and bay leaves in between the layers. Lasts for years. That's very interesting. Because yeah, that would take up every single little nook and cranny that you have. Great idea. Scratchmade said we dealt with them at work in pecans. We used traps off Amazon. Oh, gotcha. That must be for the moths. Awesome. Andrea said, I forgot to mention the bay leaf. I put 1 or 2 in every jar. Seems to work well thus far. Interesting. Like I said, we've had the moths here before, but not, for us, we were able to eradicate it by just getting clutter out of corners and out of drawers. But we also live in a very cold area, so we don't have a lot of pest problems because a significant part of the year is too cold for them to reproduce or even live. Okay. So everybody's saying bay leaves work really well to keep the moths away. Good job, guys. All right, Joyce said moth traps are pheromone cardboard triangle. We keep them by bird cage on top of the refrigerator. Awesome. Okay, so it sounds like Dr. Killigan's is a solution for the moths, and also the bay leaves. All right, Andrea said, do you prefer to use cloth or plastic covers for your garden? Freeze protection. I've used both. I find that the plastic covers, the Rime, the cold cloth fabric, is lighter, and so it's easier to move on and off. But old sheets and stuff, I think, work just as well, as long as you remember to take them off. They don't breathe as well. They're heavier. You need a little bit more sturdy poles or arches to put them on. Let's see. Crystal72 said, I usually don't comment, but I wanted to thank you for sharing your knowledge. You've been a huge help. I appreciate it. Oh, you are so kind. I'm glad it helps. Live streams are much easier for me than trying to put a whole video together about something like this. And I kind of get off on tangents. Andrea said, can you eat oats? I can't. And they make Kaya very congested, but we keep it on hand as a lesser evil. Does that make sense? We can go, this one 5-gallon bucket is going to last us for 6 months. And the reason for that is that we don't use very much of it. But I do we really, really struggle to eat dry goods. We don't digest them very well. But in a pinch, I want to have the ones that are the least harmful to us on hand. Things like quinoa and oatmeal for the girls. I don't do very well with them. I don't even really do well with split peas. But in a pinch, I want to have them on hand. What I find is that if I have to eat dry goods that are like that, I have to really amp up my yoga and I have to amp up my trampoline workouts because my lymph stops working when I eat those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I keep them on hand. I don't personally store a massive amount of dry goods because we can't eat it every day. But I do store enough that at the rate we eat it now, it would last us for 6 months or a year. Does that make sense? Mostly what we have in storage is other things. Mostly what we have in storage is on the hoof. It's why I store so many garden seeds, is because we eat out of our garden rather than having a massive amount of food storage that's dry goods. Okay, Half-Ass Farm said we were all out Saturday in shorts and sandals. Good old South Dakota. Oh my gosh, in South Dakota. Wow. Remind us it's not quite time for that snow and 6 degrees Sunday night, right? Yeah. My dad and I used to go to South Dakota when I was a kid on business. And oh my gosh, it was even colder than here. It was so, oh my gosh, it was so cold. Village Setter said, my homemade granola is way better than pre-made. It's fresher and customizable. Well, exactly. That's why you want to store single ingredients, is because then you can use it in every recipe and you're not tied down to the expense and advertising that the pre-made things have. Along that lines, I wanted to talk about canned goods in a different show, but along that line with pre-made, I wanted to talk about things like this. This is tomato paste. You see, it's a very small can. This is 6 ounces. Now, this is a Pregu. This is a spaghetti sauce can. Now, this will make a full jar of this. It has less water in it. This, when you get this pre-made at the store, it has a lot of water in it. And the packaging is expensive. This packaging is inexpensive, so they sell it to you less expensively than this. I think these are close to like $3-4 for this, or even more now. I don't know. This is 48 cents. So I can make a full jar of spaghetti sauce, enough for my whole family, out of this little can. But that's not the only thing I can make out of this. I can make spaghetti sauce. I can make tomato soup. I can put this into a vegetable soup so that it has a tomato base. I can make lasagna sauce. I can make, what else have I made with it? Lasagna. So, I mean, any kind of tomato product, you can make it out of tomato paste. This is not tomato sauce. You can also get a little can like this that's tomato sauce. It is also mostly water. This doesn't have any flavor. It doesn't have any salt in it. It is just tomato product. And so what you do is you put this in your pan. You put quite a bit of water in it. And then you add your spices and you add water or don't add water in order to get a different texture. And so any kind of tomato product, store this. Do not store Pregu or whatever other type of pre-made tomato thing there is. Get this. And there's a lot of other types of concentrates that you can get with this too. When you store this kind of thing, you need to make sure that you're also storing your spices, because otherwise this is very bland. And that would be like my homegrown peppers. And you also need salt, and you need Italian seasoning. So I always do those in bulk. The seasonings that I like the most go in the biggest jars. The ones you go through the most go in the biggest jars. And depending on your climate, you're going to want oxygen absorbers in there in your spices. What are you doing, honey? Okay. Are you 100% finished with everything out there? And where's the dog? Is he out on the deck? No. Okay, then bring him when he comes up to the door. Go ahead and put him in his kennel, okay? All right, Squeaky Tree. Okay, thank you for coming in, Squeaky Tree. So One of the reasons I'm doing this breakdown, this talking about food storage is because Squeaky Tree came and asked if I wanted to be part of a collaboration that is on the 1st. And so I'm working on that video now. And what she has asked us to do the collaboration on is if I was to start a homestead in 2022, how would I do it? How would I do it differently than when I did in the beginning? And so again, that'll be up on the 1st. And there'll be a whole bunch of other collaborators that I'll put in the description at that point. But Squeaky Tree Homestead is the one who started that. And I'm excited to do it. It was very thought-provoking to run through everything, because currently, right now, what I am doing is, for me, because of how my family eats, I'm putting my food storage money into my homestead feed. Not into new homestead animals, not into new homestead structures, into homestead feed. And the reason for that is because as fuel prices go up, hey buddy, as fuel prices go up and as availability of feed wavers a little bit.
Ow.
For my family, I already have all my animals in place. So what I'm currently spending all my money on is dry goods for my livestock. Feed prices have gone up by 35% in 1 year. So what I used to be able to buy at $13 a 50-pound bag is now $17 for a 50-pound bag. And some of it you might not be able to even get, is what they're telling me, is that the supply chains are somewhat broken right now. So for those of you who are in the same position as me, where you rely very heavily on your homestead to feed you, and where you've replaced your grocery budget with a feed budget, which is what happens unless you grow your own feed. And if you do grow your own feed, you're putting diesel and equipment towards it. So I feel like it really balances out. You can grow your own feed, but you're going to pay for your equipment. You're going to pay for your fences. You're going to pay for your, your diesel and that, and for your seed. It takes generations to create a truly self-sustainable farm. Generations. The people that you see out on YouTube now that have really productive farms and they can throw a lot of money at it and it comes back to them are people who are living on family property. Like Arm's family homestead, his property was given to him by his father. He's improved it a lot, but it was family land. The same thing with Justin Rhodes. He lives on property that was from his father. He lives in a home that was a family home. It doesn't mean they're not like putting money and time into it, but it is still at least a 2-generation thing. Now, our home here we're the first generation here, so we have a lot of work to do. But for my children, if they don't sell my home, if they don't sell our little farm, they will have handed to them all the process and all the work and all the equipment that I have into it, and they won't have to make those purchases. So they'll be really quite a bit ahead. That being said, a lot of the equipment that I have came from my dad, from his farm, even though I don't live on the same farm that he started. So these kind of things, they really stay in your family if you're careful about it, and then it saves so much time and money. But sorry, what I was saying was the dry goods that I'm purchasing right now are not for my family. The dry goods I'm purchasing right now are for my livestock that I depend on that grow food for my family. And I do not think that anybody who doesn't already have their homestead started should do it that way. If you don't have food storage, get food storage. If you don't have your dry goods, get massive amounts of dry goods. Put them in buckets. A lot of times you can get buckets at bakeries. They'll have the little 2-gallon buckets and they're plenty good. Otherwise, you can go to like Walmart, and sometimes you have local grocery stores that stock that kind of thing. And honey, can you go shut the door to your bedroom so we can't hear him? And so find inexpensive buckets. Don't be spending $15 a piece on 5-gallon buckets. Go to bakeries, get them for $1, stuff like that. Do your best to really maximize the productivity of the money that you're using on your food storage, but get your food storage. Yesterday I was talking about salt. Salt is part of our storage, but I have it in a whole different category from my regular dry storage because I use my salt to preserve things. I use my salt to preserve meat. I use my salt to preserve vegetables. Things like kimchi and sauerkraut, you need salt. If you're going to do cured and salted pork and you don't want to have to put it in a freezer or refrigerator, you need salt. So let's see if there were any questions that I missed. Let's see. Andrea said she had to burn a dresser and just be vigilant with not supplying food for pests. Yeah, sometimes they just get, no, put it down, no more. If you want to come do some oatmeal, come do some oatmeal, okay? Hi, Grandma Ginger. Let's see. Andrea said, lesser food, evil us. I do understand there's a psychology to be explored for those inflamed by food. Tamara said, watching from Barbados. Oh, that's awesome. I bet you're warmer than we are. Tamara said, just finished watching your last video. I hope you liked it. I'm trying to make these simple. They're not as short as I would like them, but I'm trying to keep them simple. Scott, hey, Scott. If you guys haven't seen Scott, you should go check him out. He has an amazing gardening channel. As much as I love grown tomatoes, it's more practical to stock up on cheap tomato paste cans. I 100% agree. I grow tomatoes, but I keep a year's worth of these on hand because of practicality. It's very hard for me to cook down tomatoes to the point where they're paste like this. And it's just not practical for me to do that. So I keep these on hand just because it's smart. They're cheap. Susan K said, I have to go. Have a good day. Bye, Susan. Half-Ass Farm said, or Half-Ass Ranch said, 51 in chat and only 20-something likes. Show some love, folks. Thank you. Yeah, if you guys can do a thumbs up, that would be great. Vivian King said, hi, in South Arkansas, have gained so much inspiration for myself and telling everyone I know how doable your technique of gardening is for any age or stage of gardening. Oh, thank you. That is very kind. Pardon me. Joyce said, Pragu sauce. There you go. Do you mean Prego and Ragu? Yeah, I probably do. Oh, good job. Andrea said, we jumped into multi-species homesteading in 2020 when stores ran out of meat, dairy, bread, etc. We had only a modest chicken flock prior. Yeah, so the thing about homesteading is it is great to have the supply of food on your homestead. For us, one of the reasons we did it was because of quantity issues. We have a family of 4. We're big eaters. I burn through calories very, very quickly. And so even though we could have afforded like a gallon of organic milk a week, it would not have been enough to actually fill us up. And we pretty much never could have afforded organic meat for our family. And so it was a quantity thing, even more than it was a quality thing. And so when we started homesteading, and when it really took off and was effective, has actually just been within the last 2 years. Previous to that, I was putting a lot of money into feed because I had the wrong livestock. I had the wrong animals for the job for what I was doing on my homestead. And so when you start to homestead, really try to find your people locally who are doing it and who are living on it. Don't go buy livestock from people who are doing it for show. Don't go buy it from people who are like necessarily commercial growers. You want to be buying your livestock from people who are doing it on a penny and filling their freezer on a penny, because the commercial growers and people who make a living doing it a lot of times do grow their own feed. And so it can all get very convoluted around the livestock issue, because if you're buying retail feed for a retail pig, you're never going to break even. If instead you grow your garden and you feed your family off your garden and the extra goes to a little slow growing homestead hog, and that little homestead hog is big enough to fit in your freezer, but not too big to fit in your freezer, you can afford to do that because you are growing your own feed on your property. A commercial pig cannot survive on garden stuff. It grows too quickly. It needs too much protein. But a little homestead hog that you have to be careful not to give too much protein because it'll get too fat is ideal because, well, how many pounds of pork do you really want in the freezer anyway? Anyway, I got off on a tangent on that. So what I'm going to say is be careful about your livestock. Don't listen to the hype about newfangled animals or heritage animals. Instead, find locally animals that you can really learn about from the person you bought them from, whether it's goats or pigs or chickens or whatever. Buy from the people that are local that are filling their own freezer. Oh, I hope it didn't go unstable. It said I'm unstable. Let's see. Andrew said breeders for Fair had an overstock of Fair because of Fair and auctions were closed. So in our area right now, and in most areas, it comes down to butchers. Can you find someone to butcher your livestock? For us, we were already butchering a lot of our animals, but for the bigger ones, we weren't doing that so much. We really liked to have the butcher come and do our 300-pound pigs. When we switched to smaller animals that we were butchering out at 100 pounds, all of a sudden it became way easier to butcher our own animals. And a lot of people right now are getting into homesteading and they're afraid of butchering their own animals. And the thing is, you don't want to hold an animal over past the point where they're ready to be butchered, because then you're putting feed into it for no reason. Farmstead Meatsmith, so for those of you who want to butcher your own animals, Farmstead Meatsmith is amazing. He will teach you how to butcher everything and how to be confident, and you're just using a knife. You don't have to have special equipment of any kind to butcher at home. You just need a sharp knife and a sharpening stone. A meat saw is very helpful, but not essential. You can just do it with a knife. Let's see. So Andrea had a good point. So a lot of people out there are afraid to butcher their own animals, and yet they can't afford to feed them anymore. So go on Craigslist, go on Facebook, and look for livestock right now. One of the ways that we fill our freezer is with free animals from people on Craigslist who just don't want to raise them anymore. They're not getting the most bang for their buck because they're not willing to butcher them, and they don't want to be putting expensive feed into them anymore. And so they'll put them up for free or for $1 a piece on Craigslist. That's how we got into our meat rabbits. Is there was a guy who didn't have room in his freezer. He had 20 babies that had just weaned, and he just didn't want them anymore. So for $1 a piece, we got 20 rabbits. We saved breeders out of that batch because he was really raising rabbits. He wasn't they were not pet rabbits. They were not show rabbits. He was literally filling his freezer, and now he had an overstock of rabbits. So we spent $20 and got 20 rabbits. We saved breeders. We got into it. We went and got more breeders from him. We filled up our freezer with the rest, and we were off to the races for $1 a piece for these rabbits. The same thing is true for ducks and chickens. A lot of times people will have roosters or chickens that they don't like and that are eating eggs or something. We'll bring those chickens home. We'll butcher the ones we don't like or the ones that are extra. We'll put them in the freezer, and then the others we'll save for our own egg layers. And so a lot of our livestock that comes on the farm is like that. Our pigs are the same way. We got a couple pigs to try out, and they were like $50, for the first one. And then I bought a breeder because I liked him, and it was $150 bred. And she didn't get bred. She wasn't. Yeah. Anyway, those first two pigs went in our freezer. And then our friend had more baby pigs, and she didn't know what to do with them. And she was feeding them commercial feed, so she couldn't afford to do it. And so she asked me if I wanted baby pigs and to just come get them. And so I traded her a sheep. I got 4 baby pigs. I just made a ton of money selling those baby pigs because we were just feeding them on garden surplus. It didn't cost us anything. And from those baby pigs, we also kept some breeders. And so watch Craigslist, watch Facebook to get into your livestock. Watch for people who are actually putting animals up because they're inconvenienced by it or they're afraid to butcher. So the most valuable thing you can do right now is educate yourself, learn how to butcher things, and then you can get free animals and fill your freezer. I do like to have the animals on my own feed and on my own property for about 2 to 6 weeks to get good food into them and get them parasite free and healthy before I butcher them. Because a lot of people, when they're in that situation where they don't want to feed their animals anymore, they will kind of neglect their animals sometimes a little bit, or they'll have had them in too small of a pen where they get parasites build up. So we do like to quarantine them and get them clean and happy before we butcher them. Sorry, I am definitely getting sidetracked on my homesteading tangent instead of talking about dry goods. So currently today, John is at the feed store. My local farmer that I usually get my grain from just found out that his grain was a total loss. It got wet and it molded, and so we cannot get grain from him. So it's It's $100 more expensive to go get it at the feed store, but John is going to go get me a pallet of feed today. I paid for it with cash by selling some of my extra pigs. Our freezers are full. That's the only reason I'm selling our livestock. So we had five full freezers, if you believe it, 5 full freezers. And I looked at that and realized I was hoarding. And the freezers are full of meat. That's what they're full of, is meat. And we also have meat still in smokehouse. So those pigs really did us good this year. But we also have ducks and rabbits and other things in the freezer. So I'm just about to run out of my feed. I had made a deal with my farmer to go get feed from him. So I hadn't let myself get down without having something to replenish it with, but it turns out his wheat was bad. So John is getting a pallet of bagged feed from a retail store, feed that I can feed to all the animals. I cook it for the pigs, and then I give scratch grain to the chickens. So I'm getting scratch grain to cook for my pigs, and then we'll use the same grain for the chickens and the ducks. We're cutting down on the number of animals we have because of the cost. Feed prices are 35% higher than they were a year ago. And so that is my dry goods. My dry goods go in the barn instead of in my pantry. And so I get kind of excited when I have success like this, where I look at it and I realize I overproduced, and it didn't cost very much. And that's to me what gets really exciting, is when at this point the livestock is paying for their own food storage, and that food storage goes into them, and then it comes to us in our freezers. So what I did this week is I sold 2 of my freezers. We got everything out and compiled it and packed it as hard as we could into 3 freezers. So now we have 3 freezers absolutely packed with meat. 2 I just sold because things were a little more spread out. They were full, but we really packed them in now. So I sold 2 freezers to make space for more feed for the animals, so that I'm 6 months ahead on all my feed needs for my animals. I did go and buy all of the minerals that I needed for my animals. Not a lot, 1 50-pound bag for each type of animal. So we have a 50-pound bag of pig minerals, we have a 50-pound bag of sheep minerals, and we have a 50-pound bag of goat minerals. And that's what we have on hand now. And the reason I did that is because those things are that quantity is going to last us for years. But I wanted to make sure that I had enough and more than enough. Minerals are very, very important. Just like our vitamins are important to us, you need minerals for your animals. Okay, so I am blathering, as I often do. We'll see if we can go back and see what other people are saying. Grandma said that they're getting a year's worth of animal minerals right now, and they're not that expensive. I mean, the amount you get back from having good minerals for your animals is not really to be calculated. They go through so little of it. Andrea said we definitely changed our budget from feed for us to feed for them and infrastructure to contain livestock. Yeah, it's a shift in money, not necessarily an elimination of money. So for us right now, my aim is that no money goes from any type of YouTube money that I have come in does not go to feed. My aim this year is that all of the feed comes from selling of excess animals, now that our freezers are so full and our animals are so much more efficient. The breed itself is so much more efficient than it was. In order to do that, you can't be buying livestock from other people every year. You need to actually have breeders. Until this point, I could not afford to keep a breeder pig because of the cost of feeding a commercial pig. I just couldn't find livestock that I could afford to breed. Now I have livestock that I can afford to breed. Now that I have livestock that is reproducing itself, not only do I not have to buy livestock from somebody else when I want to raise something, I now have babies that I can sell to other people. And the only reason I can do that is because I can grow a lot of the feed for these pigs myself. And the minimal amount that I can't grow for them myself is so small per animal that I can afford to buy some commercial feed. But that only happened in 2021 when I found a breed that really worked. This being said, do not go buy fancy animals. Do not go buy $300 baby pigs. If you have to put more feed into it to put it in the freezer, and then you spent too much on it to put it in the freezer, this is not what you want to do. You want to buy animals that you can afford to put in the freezer now. And that way, if there's a loss, if an animal dies and you can't put it in the freezer, it's not such a huge financial loss that you can't recover. And so whenever I get breeding animals, I either get one that has already had babies to prove that they're fertile, or I buy them bred at a price I can afford to eat them at. So if I get a pregnant sow, I want to spend so little on her that I pretty much could have just gone and got a feeder pig, and that the price will have balanced out. If it turns out she's not pregnant, I don't want to have spent so much on her that I can't afford to eat her if she's bad genetic stock and she can't hold a pregnancy. Does that make sense? Hey, Stringfield, how are you? Hey, thinking of others. Northern Georgia, fun. Joyce said, off to do some chores at a neighbor's. Be blessed. Bye, Joyce. Crystal said, I just had to take all my seedlings in yesterday. Huge hail and tornadoes. I saw that. So was that Central Texas? I saw that. I hope the storms move out so I can get my seeds back out, right? To the sun. Okay, Sherm Dog said, I just put 600 pounds of pork in our freezer. That's amazing. What kind of pigs are you raising, Sherm? I would love to know. So the ones that we're raising right now are a three-way mix. They are Julianne, which is like a teacup pig, but it's a normal size of the same breed that is a teacup pig. They're called Juliana. And then Kuni Kuni and American Guinea Hog. The American Guinea Hog is our least favorite part of that mix. We want less American Guinea Hog and more of the other two, because the American Guinea Hog gets so overly fat so easily. Oh my gosh, they're like a Cornish cross chicken. They get to the point where they can't walk on the same amount of feed that our other pigs that are just as efficient on feed are getting. So the American Guinea Hog part of it is not our favorite. All right, let's see. Okay, Sherm Dog said agreed. We butchered our pigs and bought lambs so we can do it ourselves. I think that's so smart. I do need to put a video up soon about how we do our lambs, because and so you probably have milk animals is my guess, because if you don't have milk animals and you're bringing in baby animals that need milk, you're spending a lot of money on milk replacer. Just leave it, honey. Thank you.
I just needed space to put so we can start moving.
Just wait, okay? So what we do is when we need to get baby lambs, the only time we get baby lambs is if we don't have enough breeding ewes. The reason for that is that baby lambs have a tendency to die, and they have a tendency to be sickly, and then you have to bottle feed them every 4 hours, so you're kind of stuck to the homestead. So what we do instead is we get our milk goats to adopt baby lambs, and that way the baby lambs have a mother, they have a flock, they have a herd, they're much happier. And I need to do a video on how we do that. And I've been doing that since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I think I was like 12 the first time I did that. But we have 6 lambs out there in the front, and 2 of them are on their own mother with Heidi. But we have 2 goats up there that have the other 4 lambs adopted by the goats. And it makes for a healthier sheep. And we only do that if we need more breeding ewes. This year, you guys saw that with my Patreon. But I have documented that on my Patreon. I do have that link in the description if you want to be part of that and support the channel. My Patreon page, I do like a brain dump a couple times a week, talking about how I do things and why I do things and the solutions I'm trying to come up with. But it costs like $80 to feed 1 baby lamb on milk replacer. $80 for the 3 months that you have them on a bottle. So it's very expensive. Whereas if you do it with milk goats, it's pretty nominal fee. It's just a little amount of money. What was I saying? Oh, so we bought that other sheep that we used the money from a whole year of Patreon. We spent $340. We didn't make that much on Patreon. We made like $280 for the year on Patreon, but it paid for most of the sheep. We got the sheep. We got her in here. I was really excited because she was supposed to have litters. She was supposed to have like 5 babies, which would set me way ahead. And I was super excited about it. I don't do that very often where I'll spend hundreds of dollars on an animal because I can't afford to butcher a $340 sheep. And so I broke my own rule there. What ended up happening is that the farmer had sold us a wether. He hadn't looked under the tail when he sold us that ewe, and she was a he, and he was not pregnant. And so the guy ended up taking that sheep back, and it turned out that his whole flock that year lost all their lambs, that the ram that he'd brought in was not a good ram and genetically inferior, and all the babies died. And so that was a blessing to me because he has to reimburse me my money for that wether that was not a ewe. But that's one of those things where I have to learn that lesson over and over again. I don't do it very often, but every once in a while I do get into a magic bullet mindset of thinking that a certain animal or a certain very expensive fruit tree is going to make the difference between life and death on the homestead. And I spend way too much money. And then when it fails, I feel like a fool. It always works better when I just go buy cheap and put a little bit more effort into it and do it smart instead of doing it the fast magic bullet way. So what we had to do this year was go get bum lambs again, and they were $15 and $20 a piece. We put them on goats, and it's worked well. But it always works better when I really stay within my cash budget. When I go outside my cash budget, I always regret it because the juice is never worth the squeeze when you go outside your budget, especially in homesteading because it's so unpredictable. You don't know what's going to succeed. You don't know what's going to fail. So stay within your budget, like way below your budget. Hobby Woodworker said, if ground amendments become difficult to get, the rule of the old farmers was anything that can run, walk, crawl, slither, or fly off of your property, then it's safe to sell them or you need some money. Very true. Let's see. Let's see. Where did we go? Let's see. Hobby Woodworker said all crops mine nutrients from the soil and make it poor unless you return them back to the soil. Yes. So right now we have the lambs and the goats up in the garden, and we are grazing them up in the garden on the hay that we feed to them until we have grass. And the reason for that is so that they can manure the front garden and eat any weeds that come up before we're ready to plant. They will keep all the weeds down and come and cut again and eat all the weeds down. And so come about the middle of April, when we're going to start putting things in the garden, that's when we'll take the sheep and the goats out and we'll put them on a different pasture. But for now, we have them there just to absolutely annihilate any weeds that come up and put lots of manure down. Sherm Dog said, pig doubled in price in my location and couldn't afford them. Yeah. Our minimum that we're paying for pigs right now that aren't my pigs are like $85 for a feeder pig. Or no, not a feeder pig, for a weaner pig. $85 for a weaner pig. And then you're paying $30 for a 50-pound bag of feed for it. If it's a commercial pig, it's going to go through that feed very quickly. Having milk goats in a garden helps with that, but some commercial pigs won't even eat garden produce. Our last commercial pigs, which was Hamp crossed with Duroc, they wouldn't even eat garden produce. They'd drink milk, they'd eat their commercial feed, but they didn't want anything to do with anything green. And they would not eat hay. Our current pigs that we have, half of their diet is hay. The other half is just cooked wheat. And we've started to add a little bit more goat's milk into it now that the goats have kidded. But for a lot of people, right now the issue is the butcher not having. We're a year and a half out here if you want a butcher to do a large animal. It's not such a big deal for us because we've always butchered our animals. We've always known how to do it. But with our 300-pound hogs, it was really hard to get that meat chilled well enough to put it in the freezer and not have it spoil. And so I really do like these smaller pigs. Tamara said, we enjoy your videos. You show people how to start from a small budget. Yes, we are very hot. We depend on all of our feeds from outside. We import all of our raw grain and made feed. And we're the same thing. Any grain that we feed our animals is purchased on the outside. However, I supplement heavily on that. And with the rabbits, we've actually replaced our commercial feed with wheat and sunflowers and hay. I do still put a few commercial pellets in, but they don't eat hardly any of it. They much prefer this other stuff that we have them on now. And the reason I did that was because I can't afford to breed my rabbits. Like I can afford to have a couple rabbits, but not breed them if they're on commercial feed, because commercial feed went from $15 a bag to $20 a bag. in like 3 months. And so I wanted to have things I could get locally from local farmers instead of being dependent on things that had to come down a supply chain. And I wanted to get my rabbits adjusted to that before it became essential. Before I couldn't get those foods, I wanted to make sure to switch my animals to those feeds. Spring Meadow Farm and Garden said, hi, everyone. Hey, Tamara said homesteading and small farming is a lifestyle. Yes, it has to be a lifestyle. And for us, I guess I'll say this again, it's about quantity. From our 3 milk goats, they were each giving a gallon of milk a day and 7 days a week. And so 3 times 7 is 28. No, it's not. It's 21. 3 times 7 is 21. So we were getting 21 gallons of goat's milk a week from our 3 goats. And I could have gone and bought goat's milk at $12 a gallon from the health food store, but I could have only afforded like maybe 2 gallons of milk a week. With that 21 gallons of milk, we can make cheese, we can feed baby lambs, we can make yogurt, we can make ricotta, and then we take the whey from when we make cheese and we feed it to the pigs. And so those 3 goats so much pay for themselves, and it means we have enough quality and quantity and variety of food, because the pigs or the goats don't just feed us, they feed the pigs, they feed the lambs. And so that means we now have pork and lamb in our freezer too, and that came from the goats. So yeah, the homesteading is a lifestyle, and for us it wasn't even about the quality, it was about the quantity. We eat a lot in order to stay healthy, and a gallon or 2 of milk a week just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't. And a roast or 2 a week of organic meat just doesn't cut it. That being said, with our homegrown meat, a roast that big is more than enough meat for our family of 4, because it's very good, it's very concentrated, and it is like each of us eat maybe like half a cup of meat at a meal, and it's enough. Speaking of which, Kaya, can you get the lamb roast dished up so everybody can have some with the potato? And we need to get the bone broth and put it in jars in the fridge. Help me remember that. All right, so let's see. Thinking of others, very wise, sounds good. Andrew said we had some infrastructure here, but had to add so much more. Yeah, last year I spent a lot of money on fences because I wanted to make chores easier. We had the goats on stakes, and that worked just fine, but it meant we had to go out and check on the animals and move shelters and walk more water and keep ducks out of goats' water and that kind of thing. And in the end, I just decided that I wanted to put in more infrastructure, not because we had to have it, but because I wanted to make it easier for us to do our work, and I wanted the animals to be more comfortable. And so I think it's and I think as long as you have the money to put in infrastructure, but make sure that it pays you back very quickly in what it is you're doing. Thank you for liking the like button. Thinking of others. Okay, Tamara said, I used to have 200 layers and sell eggs, but had to get rid of them and cut down to 20, just enough for home vegetable. Gave you more bang for your buck. Yes, I have never sold any of my products. The reason is that I don't have the time and energy in my life to take care of my family well, while also making food for other people. So yeah, we only keep enough egg layers to provide our own egg needs. And in fact, we have like 6 more animals that need to be butchered right now to get them off the feed bill, but I don't have room in the freezer, again, because I just sold those 2 freezers. And so you also kind of have to watch about overproduction, even when you're only producing for yourself. If I sell to other people, I sell it live on the hoof. I don't butcher it for them. I don't do anything like that. I don't produce for anybody else. I'll sell extra live animals, but I don't put the effort in to butcher it myself, because there's red tape there. There's health and safety standard type stuff there. And also there's just the inconvenience. And so if I sell something to somebody, it's a live animal. Crystal said they are an hour and a half west of Houston. Gotcha. Well, I hope your weather improves. That's scary. We get really good winds here too, but every few years we'll get something close to a tornado, but for the most part, we just get like gusting winds. Yeah, wind's not fun. It's kind of scary. You always wonder if your house and your farm is going to still be there when it's gone. All right, Andrea said, do you like to can your meat, or is that process too intense to meet your needs? So we have canned meat. Sometimes when we get a really big batch of like roosters or something, we'll can part of the meat, but we just don't like it as much. We just don't digest it as well. We find that by doing it and keeping it fresh and frozen, we just digest it better. So if we have a glut and I need to get animals off the food budget, I will do up a pressure can batch of meat, but I try to avoid it just because of the way that our digestion works. Let's see. Grandma Ginger's farm said, we have fostered all sorts of babies to new mamas over the years, but have not fostered cross species. So would love to see how you do that. So again, I have written it out on my Patreon account, but I will work on a video. I do actually already have a video. It's not a very good video, and I was a little bit cranky in it. John was trying to help me. If I remember right, I kind of snapped at him at one point, which is too bad. I need to make a new video of it though, because we've been much more, we have it much more streamlined now than when I used to do it. And the whole theory of why it works and how to do it is not different from how I used to do it, but the sheep and the way sheep work versus the way goats work, there are a few little nuances, but not much. The real thing you have to know is just you have to, when you treat it as if you were milking the goat, and you bring the lamb to the goat for about 3 days. Every 4 hours, you take the goat and put it on the stanchion, bring the baby. And the trick there is to have mixed feed, not sweet feed. I mix beet pulps, pellets, and alfalfa pellets and sunflower seeds and sweet feed. So that's just a very minimal amount of sweet feed. And I mix that all up and give it to the goat. And the goat will pick through all the other things to get to the sweet feed. So it really slows the goat down while it's at the stanchion, gives the lamb time to nurse before the goat figures out what's happening. And then because the goat is used to kind of being violated on the milk stanchion anyway, eventually she just doesn't care that it's a live animal that's nursing her instead of you milking. And after 3 days, the lamb smells like her, and so she'll just nurse it. That's what we have found. Hey, CJ, Northern Idaho. I love Northern Idaho. Beautiful, beautiful area. Man Pig Bear said, what kind of goats do you have? So we have Guernsey and Alpine. We have raised a whole bunch of other types, but our best supplier locally has Alpine and Guernseys, the best stock with the best tasting milk, the amazing goats. So we are with Guernsey and Alpine. Not because we necessarily prefer those breeds, but because we prefer those goats from that supplier. CJ said, we have layers, and this will be our first year of meat birds. We want to do pigs and goats, but are hesitant. I find I don't raise baby birds anymore. If I'm going to raise chickens for meat for my family, I get them off Craigslist for free when people are getting rid of roosters. The reason for that is because of the expensive feed. And so have I done meat birds before? I have done meat birds before, and I know it's very difficult to break out at zero with them. Most of our meat that is poultry comes from free birds from Craigslist. The majority of our meat comes from free animals if it's poultry. This last year, we did a whole bunch of ducks because we got free ducks, but they were babies when we got them instead of adults. And I spent so much money on feed to get them to the point where we could butcher them and sell them as adults. So we did not break even on the ducks. I never break even on poultry when they're babies. Pigs, yes, because I can feed them from the garden. Rabbits, yes, because I can feed them from the garden. Sheep, yes, because I can feed them off the goats. Poultry, if I could figure out how to grow my own grain on 1.5 acres, yes. However, birds are definitely easier to start out with than a mammal. I think if you have a pellet form of food and it's your first time raising meat, birds are a great place to start just because of convenience. But if I were you, I'd get on Craigslist and find free animals, free birds locally. Like, for instance, if you are in central U.S. Or even a little bit southern U.S., you can get battery chickens, like the egg-laying chickens. When we were in Tulsa, we got chickens for like $3 a piece. They were battery chickens. We had to put feed into them for a couple weeks to get them up to weight. And then they were great layers. And then if we'd wanted to, we could have got more and butchered them. We didn't do that because we were in the middle of town. And it was hard for us to find a place to butcher that people weren't going to report us. But battery hens are a great way to fill your freezer with meat. Battery hens for $3 a piece. And then put good feed into them, let them grow their feathers back, see which ones are good layers, the ones that aren't good layers. Go ahead and butcher them, fill your freezer for $3 a bird, plus feed for a few weeks. You really can't beat that. All right, let's see. The thing about mammals as opposed to birds is a lot of times the infrastructure for things like goats and sheep and rabbits and stuff, you have a little bit more infrastructure to put in than you do with just putting in a chicken coop for chickens. So there is that. I would say find somebody local that raises their own goats and raises their own other animals. Get to be friends, go see what they're doing, see what you like, see what you don't like, and learn from your local people, because you're going to have different parameters for your animals than what I have for my animals here. Tony Renee said, good morning, new to your channel and first time here. So good to see you. Thinking of others said, everyone, please tell your friends to visit this channel. You are so kind. Yes, if you guys have a favorite video that you've seen, please share it. I really struggle to remake videos that I've already made. And so a lot of people just don't know about videos that are out there. I have so many videos. And I feel bad that some of them have such low views because I think they have good information, but my strong point is not sharing my own videos. I make them and then I put them up and then I forget about them. I'm not very good about marketing it. But I would really like not to have to remake some of those videos. Southern Prairie Homestead said, I want quantity also. I'm also growing our mainstays, herbs, spices. Oh yeah, if you can grow your own vegetables, you are so on top of it. Even though fresh produce in the grocery store is the least expensive food you can buy, sometimes the quality is not really good, but also the quantity you need in order to actually get full can sometimes be prohibitive, even though it's the least expensive food in the store. And if you grow your own food, you can also feed it to your animals. Man Pig Bear said, we used to sell eggs, now we sell chickens past 2 years. So do you guys have a really good source of feed then? For us, when we can get inexpensive feed, we bring more baby animals in than normal. But we've had a hard time finding inexpensive feed lately. Our local farmers are selling it out of state more than they used to. Menno Hippie said, could you please tell me your med for asthma for over-the-counter? I don't use over-the-counter medication for asthma. Inhalers don't work for me. I do a lot of mullein, M-U-L-L-E-I-N, mullein tea, and NAC, which is N-acetylcysteine. Those help me a lot. But also what really helps my asthma is yoga and mini trampoline bouncing, because it clears my lymph, which then helps my lungs. Tamara said, had Duroc. Is that Duroc? I'm not familiar with Duroc, so I wonder if it's Duroc pigs. Don't like them, too expensive. They made me broke, too much commercial feed. Yeah. Our last commercial pigs we raised were Hamp Duroc crosses, and they refused to eat hay. They refused to eat beets. They refused to eat anything that we were growing. They only wanted commercial feed. And then when we butchered them, they were very, very lean, which is not really our thing. We like to have some fat on our pigs, and these ones were so lean. Our bacon was more like ham. Not my favorite thing. Let's see. Tamara said, do you have solar for backup energy? So I grew up with solar as a teenager. Our homestead was fully hooked up to solar, and it was very, it is, even now, 25, 30 years later, solar is expensive and it can be very finicky. And the upkeep on it and the replacement of batteries is very prohibitive and very expensive. I do not think that solar is a good solution for the average person. What we have instead is a wood burning stove and a hand pump on our well. And we have an outhouse. And so the things that we have that are replacements for electricity for our essentials are very primitive, but they work. They work, and you don't have to really maintain them. We can have 2 or 3 years worth of wood on our homestead. We spread it out so all the wood isn't next to each other. So if we had a fire, we wouldn't lose it all. If there was an outside fire, we have our wood in 3 separate locations to protect it from sparks if there was an accident. And we can cook with our wood stove. We can heat with our wood stove. We can dehydrate with our wood stove, and we can with our wood stove. The outhouse is if we didn't have water in the house. We have hygiene already set up with an outhouse. And then we have a hand pump on our well so that we could pump water even if we didn't have electricity. And we did that instead of spending $30,000 on solar panels that we then have to spend another $10,000 on batteries every 7 years or whatever. And the reason for that is because I grew up with solar, and it's very prohibitively expensive and prohibitively management intensive. San Hollow Farms, hey, good to see ya. He's one of my locals. We are local to, well, not terribly local to each other. We're a bit apart, but that's pretty fun. And Pig Bear said we get the veggie scrap from local restaurants, huge cost saving. So they've made that illegal in our area. If you can do that, that is brilliant. We used to be able to do that. We could get all sorts of stuff from our local grocery stores, but now they pour bleach on it in their dumpsters and they won't let us have it because they are worried that people might actually eat the food. But yeah, if you can get that, that is amazing and good for you. Good as Evil says, thank you very much for those ideas from the Philippines. You're welcome. Philippines, you're a ways off. Manpig said we give them eggs in return. I think you're brilliant. We have some local restaurants that do that they actually save the restaurant scraps for their pigs. And I love that they do that. That makes me so happy when people recognize that it's a wasted resource and that you need to hold on to that. K Doodle said, Julia, have a goal to self-build 2 pallet beds and cover with arched cattle panels and greenhouse plastic, a la Dirtpatcheaven style for my first build. Thank you for the inspiration. You're so welcome. And that greenhouse has turned out to be great. It actually is doing better than my big greenhouse now. I actually put the seeds in and watered it and then closed everything up and forgot about it because I got sick. And when I went back out, everything had sprouted. It's doing very well. And so I'm really happy with it. There are some modifications I want to make to it to venting, and I will get to that as I can. Right now, I just have so many other videos on my plate that I haven't made yet that I'm struggling to get out and get more videos made. Fisherman Wife said, what state are you in? We are in Idaho. Mino Hippie said, if anyone remembers the asthma medicine, it starts with COL, I think. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Hey, Ashy Slashy, how you doing? Grandma Ginger's Farm said we have crossed Alpine Nubian does with Nigerian bucks to get a mini Alpine Nubian that provides the larger amounts of milk but eat much less like the Nigerians. In our area, we call those kinder. I think those are called kinder goats. We have a lady that has a dairy up in Victor, and what she did is she mixed Nubian and Nigerian, and I think they're called kinder goats. And she loves them. She swears by them. We have done the mini breed of goats before, and we really liked them. But in our area, our production in those goats when we had them was not nearly what our goats that we have currently is. So I think that's brilliant that you guys did that. And for us, even though we'd like to have a smaller goat, our Guernseys are smaller. But a lot of the flavor of the milk producers in our area is not great. And so in order to breed a smaller breed of goat, you have to start with good goats to begin with. And the only good ones we've had in the area are the ones that we got from our friend up in St. Anthony. Speaking of which, she's selling many of her goats right now. So if you guys want information on really great goats in Idaho, the name of their business is Cross to Grace. Dairy goats, Cross #2 Grace. And they are amazing. Pardon me. Let's see. Spring Meadow Farm said, lots of good information. Thank you. You're welcome. Southern Prairie Homestead said, I always watch your old videos. So much great information. I went and watched some of my old videos yesterday too. It was fun. I looked at what I did. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I do that? I feel so tired right now just watching me. But I don't know if I had less on my plate back then when I was doing some of that stuff, or if it just looks like I was doing a lot, because in that video I compiled like a lot of time into one video to get the message across. But yeah, I watched some of them yesterday and it just made me tired. Let's see. Grandma Ginger said, also have been crossbreeding our farmyard poultry by keeping and breeding the best foragers. I think that's brilliant. We tried that this last year with our ducks and it was not successful. I think we had too many different meat breeds mixed in with our egg layers. And it ended up that this year our egg layers with our ducks are just crap. We have like 6 or 8 egg layers, but only getting 3 eggs. What are you doing, honey? Oh, okay. But we're only getting 3 eggs a day. And so as soon as we have some of the meat eaten out of our freezers, we're going to go butcher a whole bunch of ducks and then watch Craigslist for some to replace them. Let's see. Amen to that. Minnow Hippie said, thank you so much. Thank you. Southern Prairie said, fertilizer is an issue, has been for some time now, much worse. Stocking up on organic fertilizer, farmers have been warning. Yes, that's a thing. So one of the things I'm trying so hard to do right now is get a new system built for the rabbits so that I can take my young rabbits and put them in a run system, not a grazing system, because I want to keep parasites out of them. But I want to take my young rabbits that are not my breeders and put them in a run system that is a hotbed run system so that they can build up my compost faster. And I want to put that out next to the front garden so that all I have to do is open up a hotbed, dump out the compost and put rabbit manure compost on all of my garden beds without having to haul it anywhere. Rabbits, in my opinion, are the best thing you can do for your homestead if you want good fertilizer for your garden. That being said, I do think we need to get beyond the cage system so that it's less work and for everybody, because rabbits can make compost so quickly with their manure, and the earthworms love it. And so that's what I'm working on right now. I'm having a hard time having the energy to get it done because it's a bit of a big project, but that's my new massive project, is how to create a complete composting system with rabbits so that you're pulling meat rabbits out to eat them, but you're leaving all their manure and the carbon inside to very quickly turn into compost for your garden, but to be as hands-off as possible, not having to manage them so intensively. So yeah, fertilizer is a big one. Have fertilizer on hand, but also if you are homesteading, find a way to make your own compost that's really great compost. I don't turn compost. I have autoimmune issues that I can't really put that kind of labor, that grunt work into it. I have to finesse it. And for me, the hotbeds with the rabbits, or even quail in a hotbed, manuring it, put a little carbon down, manure it, put a little carbon down, water it in, turn it into compost quickly and be able to use it. I think not hauling around manure and old bedding is essential. Your energy needs to go to other things, not to turning compost. And so that's my this year big project I want to do. Southern Prairie Homestead said many off-grid combine solar with propane in the South. And that's what my parents did. We had solar for our electrical needs, and then they used propane for their heating and for their cooking, and even for the fridge. If I remember correctly, we had a propane fridge. And so the solar ran the water pump, and the solar ran the lights in the house, and the solar ran, like, I think the freezer, but everything else. So we had solar, we had wood, and we had propane. And those were the 3 things that my parents had on our homestead when I was a kid. Let's see. Ashley Slashy said solar panels made by slave labor. Well, there's that too. Yeah. Let's see. Barbara Attaway said, yes, enjoy and learn so much from you. Thank you. Thank you. Pray you can move back to Oklahoma for my selfish reasons. We would like to be back in Oklahoma. We would like to keep this here in Idaho, but we would love to also have a place in the South. If I had the means, if I had the money, I would do it in a heartbeat. But I'm trying really hard that everything we do is on a cash basis from here on out, and be really wise with what we decide to go. We're trying really hard not to have any debt. And so if we were to move to Oklahoma, we would have to do it as a cash purchase, and we just can't do that. Not right now. So, but we'd love to be there. All right, Anne said we are off-grid in the UK. That is amazing. Good job. How are you doing that? What is your combination of power source? Southern Prairie Homestead said I have to be on solar because of the RF from smart meters. I love that. I think that's brilliant. Air conditioning in Florida, not an easy task. Yeah, that's definitely not easy. You need a screened-in porch and lots of fans. Tamara said, what about backup energy for your freezers? So backup energy for our freezers, if our power went out, we would salt everything. So if you guys remember my video from yesterday when I said salt is what you need, if our freezers went out, we would get Rubbermaid totes, and we would put down salt and then a layer of meat and then salt and then a layer of meat, and we would salt all of our meat. We would get the smokehouse going, and we would smoke our meat, and that way it is shelf stable without needing to be refrigerated. And again, Farmstead Meatsmith, go check him out. He has an online course on how to butcher and how to preserve to shelf stability many different types of animals. He starts with pigs, but this is where we learned how to do it. And we have shelf stable bacon right now that could come in the house and just hang from a hook and be fine. But you have to do it the right way. You have to do it the safe way. And he doesn't even use nitrates. He just used salt. So if my freezer went out, that 100 pounds of salt that I told you about yesterday would save all of my meat. And we would just put it in Rubbermaid totes, salt it for a few days, and then smoke it, and then hang it, and we would be good to go. That's why everybody in the South used to have smokehouses when farming was more of a thing. They didn't have refrigeration. Smoking is how they preserved it. Smoking and salting. So let's see. Tamara said I can't afford a solar. Yeah, I can't afford solar, and I don't want solar. I grew up with it. It's not my jam. Southern Prairie Homestead said tomorrow we have backup generation, both solar and gas. That's awesome. If you can afford it and it's your thing, and you love it, then you should do it. I mean, anything that I say is just from my own personal experience. It's not the gospel. Everyday Blue said, do you still have the horses? So in 2020, when we still had Airbnb here, we sold the horses. And that was because they were stuck here at the house. We didn't have them boarding or anything anymore. And we could either choose to go buy a horse trailer so that we could take better care of them and buy a truck, or we needed to turn money to other things. And so we decided not to buy a horse trailer, not to buy a truck. And instead, we sold the horses and just focused on homesteading stuff again, which we're very sad, actually. We loved our little horses. They were great. Tamara said, I'm doing a rainwater harvest and I access it through gravity feed. That's amazing. Good for you. We can't do rain harvest here. We just don't get enough rain. King's Karen said, like light plastic jars, store mucho dehydrated stuff, stack more in same space. Yeah, that totally works. These are the ones that we use because John likes to buy nuts so that he can snack on them at work. And so for dry goods, we use a lot of these plastic containers. For longer storage stuff, we keep them in glass jars. And we have 5-gallon buckets that have Ziploc bags of food storage in them for our more bulk purchase things. Let's see. Ashy Slashy said, I agree, farm smart, not hard. Yeah, and also not expensive. This year, I really had to come to Jesus experience where God said, Julie, I know you want to have it all and you want to do it all and you want to be everything, but I need you to be smarter. For one thing, previously, I was paying for our animal feed with YouTube money. Not everybody has YouTube money. And so if I can't figure out how to do this by not spending YouTube money, then you guys can't figure out how to do it either because you don't have YouTube money. And so this year, God put it very strongly on my heart that I needed to develop a way to feed my animals by selling extra animals after the freezer was full, never before the freezer's full. My food goes in my freezer first, and then I can sell extra animals. But first I have to feed my family. And so now this year, God has been very supportive in inspiration and also in meeting people who can help me feed my family and then feed other people's families and make money to pay for feed for my animals, so that no money is coming from off the homestead in order to pay for my homestead. Does that make sense? That I needed to go to the next level. Okay, so I created a YouTube channel that would pay for feed for my homestead. Great. Not everybody has that. And what's the purpose of my channel if not to show people how to do this? But instead of saying, hey, go get a YouTube channel, what I need to say instead is, okay, this is how I homestead without spending any money. No money comes out of my pocket. It all recycles through the homestead. So that's what I'm doing this year. I'm trying to develop that as far as I possibly can and tell you guys how to do it so that you can afford to homestead without going broke, because it's very easy to go broke and have an empty fridge, but have animals that are supposed to be feeding you, but they're not actually feeding you. It's too easy to do that. Southern Prairie Homestead said rural property in Florida is off the charts, nuts, up 200%. Ours is up like 400% too. You can't afford to buy land anymore. But again, we only have 1.5 acres. I know it sounds like a lot, but most people farm with a lot more than that. And most of our property isn't actually under use. Even pasture, we don't have our whole property pastured or fenced in for pasture. A lot of it just doesn't get used because I don't need it yet. I'm trying to develop it, but on 1.5 acres, I still have a significant amount of property that is not under production and is not even being grazed. So if you do it the right way, a very small piece of property can do amazing things. Southern Prairie Homestead said, boom, salt mic drop. Yep. Grandma Ginger Farm said, have you used rabbit tractors for garden prep before? So I haven't, because of the parasite thing. Rabbits can pick up parasites very quickly, and because they're in such a small space, they don't have a lot of resilience against it. If they were 100% free range and they could go anywhere, they'd survive and be fine. But if you keep them in a really small space and they can't get off of that small space, they pick up parasites very quickly. So I don't want to do a rabbit tractor, for one thing, because even though rabbits can eat grass, if they're wild, they're not eating grass. They're eating trees. They're eating bushes. They're eating a little bit of grass and a little bit of clover, but their food choice, if they're free range, is massive, very wide, and it's not grass. And so even though I've done research on grazing rabbits, it's not the best way to get a healthy rabbit. You have a lot of loss from parasites and even malnutrition if you do that. If you have rabbits on grass, you have to give them a commercial pellet, because the grass is not enough to keep them growing and healthy. What you can do is you can put them in more of a run, and you can give them sweet potato greens, you can give them hay, you can give them garden cuttings, you can give them tree cuttings, and they will have a lot more space. But what you're bringing them has a lot more variety, and they'll be healthy and off the ground, so they won't have parasites. And so you can still have a very productive system, but not lose them to disease and predation, because you're constantly putting carbon in that lifts them up off the ground, so they're not in contact with the ground and they're not in contact with parasites. So again, that's the one I'm really, really working on, because did you know you can feed a rabbit 100% off sweet potato greens and they have almost exactly the same speed of growth and health as on commercial pellets? Sweet potato greens. I also have some kudzu root ordered that I won't be able to grow outside because it's too cold here, but I could grow it in the house. Oh, so many things to be excited about with those rabbits. I'm so excited I was able to get them off the commercial feed. I have a little tiny bit of commercial feed in there in the cage at all times, but they almost don't eat it at all. They much prefer the wheat and the sunflowers and hay. And so anyway, where are we? All right, Thinking Mother said, friends, remember, salt is the answer. Well, if you want to have shelf-stable pork, it's definitely the answer. And if you want to have shelf-stable vegetables without refrigeration, salt is the answer. Katie Montgomery, hey, how are you? Hoping and praying God moves mountains for y'all to have a little option in the South. I know, I would so love to have a little place in the South. We really, really miss it. But again, so if you want to support me getting a place in the South, support our Patreon. Uh, wow, it would be a pretty, I think we make like $100 a month right now on Patreon. So it would be a very big leap for that to be able to pay for something in the South. But if God is willing, he will make me brilliant and I'll do something different and we'll be able to get a place in the South. I would love that. We loved it down there. Oh my goodness, we miss it. Maybe you could collab with someone like Roots and Refuge. Her passion is teaching, as is yours. Yes, I love Roots and Refuge. I absolutely adore her. She's amazing. Southern Prairie Homestead said, yep, still have smokehouses in rural South. Yeah, smokehouses. It's so important to have one because what you can do is anytime you butcher an animal, you can hang it in your smokehouse to let it cool overnight and to dry out a little bit. And then if you have a freezer, great, cut it up and put it in the freezer. But if you're going to salt it after that first night in the smokehouse, you salt it and then you smoke it. But you have somewhere to hang your game. Like even if you don't raise animals yourself, but you hunt, having a smokehouse is amazing. Ours is made out of reclaimed lumber and an old gazebo. You know, we took apart half of our deck and used the wood to make a smokehouse. We did not spend money on it. Stringfield Ridge Farm said, you always have great information. Thanks for passing it along. No problem. I get a little crazy about what I'm trying to share, don't I? I get pretty excited about it. When it works and when it really starts to work, oh my gosh, it feels like such a burden is lifted. My next goal is to find a way to pay 100% the mortgage off of the house and use the animals to do it. I'm not at that point yet, but I would love to be able to do. I mean, they used to call like certain types of tomatoes mortgage lifters because they could grow enough tomatoes to do something like that, to pay land off. And I would love to find a way to do that. I'm not at that point yet. At this point, I am focusing on paying for all the feed and all the improvements for the farm with the farm. One of the reasons is because YouTube money is not what it used to be. Now I make a few $100s a month. I used to make enough to support the whole family, but I was doing daily videos. And now as I age, I really struggle to get those videos out. Once a week is about all I can do. And so my capacity has changed. And if God wants to give me something and give me new information and find a new avenue to do something different, I will follow that. But for now, I am just keeping my freezer full and not spending any money doing it, which I still think is a pretty good achievement. I am an encyclopedia. Sometimes I sound like an encyclopedia. I never stop talking. Thanks for the elbow bump, Florida farm or Florida boy. Okay, Hickory Croft Farm said, so glad that we have finally managed to catch a live. I know, it's been years since I've done a live. My internet wasn't strong enough before. Kaya, can you go take the puppy out and let him run for a bit? Southern Prairie Homestead said, I noticed the price of aluminum is skyrocketing, stocking up on Mylar bags and aluminum foil. Very good, very wise. Anything you know that you use in your farm, that you use in your pantry, that you use in your kitchen, stock up on it. What I just stocked up on, I just spent $700 on fencing because I knew that I might need it for hoop houses. And I use a lot of cow panels in structures on my homestead. And the price has gone up almost $10 a panel since last year. So I went and got fence posts and I went and got cow panels. Again, it was money that came from the homestead. It wasn't even YouTube money, so that felt pretty amazing. That was just from selling extra stuff that I didn't need here on the farm. That wasn't even livestock sales. That was like I sold some saddles. I sold some furniture. I sold some appliances that we didn't need anymore or that were redundant. And so that wasn't even selling homestead animals. So if you have extra stuff in your home and on your homestead and your cash is shy right now, sell crap. Right now, I just sold 2 freezers that we didn't need anymore because when we have 5 freezers, we don't get through our meat fast enough. So now we have 3 freezers. I sold 2, and that's the money that I just gave John to go get extra feed from the feed store. Also, we sold some pigs and some other things, but half the money that I just sent with John to get feed came from selling extra freezers. And so if you have stuff that is redundant that you don't really need, you really don't need it, get it sold, go get more food storage. Get it sold, go get more supplies for your homestead. Do not let redundancy and clutter make you less efficient. Those freezers were clutter. We had plenty of freezers. The livestock that I sold yesterday was clutter because there's no way I'm going to fit her in the freezer There's no reason to fit her in the freezer, so I sold her. All right. Hickory Croft Farm said, so true. It is important to be able to stay afloat no matter how worthwhile the venture is. Yes. Priorities first. Take care of your own family first, and then work on maybe making money on your homestead. But first, put the food in the freezer. Don't ever let the magic bullet of homesteading keep you from actually feeding your family. Hey, Lonnie. She is my local. If you're looking to get into real estate in Idaho, she's your girl. She's the one that helped us find our farm. So it's fun to see so many local people in here today. That's really fun. So Hickory Croft Farm said developing takes time. That is something that many do not realize. The larger the property, the more work to get it set up and running efficiently. Yes, that's why if you're going to homestead, start with something that immediately you can afford to put in the freezer. Don't spend too much money on animals. Don't spend too much money on feed. Start with something and have it be affordable enough that if something went wrong, you could just stick it in the freezer and you don't have any losses. Again, we'll go back to redundancy. A lot of the seeds that I have, I can go buy bulk from Costco and plant them. Do as much of that as you possibly can. Split peas are great. You can eat them, but because they're split, the germ is split, you can't grow these. So beans. Let's see. Lonnie said, squeeze the family for me. Love your content. Thanks, Lonnie. Hickory Croft Farm said, we find it so much easier to bring the roughage to the rabbits. Great point on the parasites. Yes, I bring roughage to my rabbits. I really want to get them out of my wire cages. The cages are driving me crazy because especially in the summer, well, not even especially in the summer, whether it's summer or winter, you have so much maintenance for any animal that is caged. The bigger the space you can give them, the more they can take care of themselves. The bigger amount of food you can put in for them, the more roughage they can handle, because a rabbit in a cage has very limited space for roughage. A rabbit in a cage is limited in their floor space. So you can't put a huge amount of roughage in there and still have room for them to stay clean. But if you have a big space for them and you can put the roughage in and they can eat it and spread it out a little bit, you can put in a bigger container of water, you can put in a shade cloth, you can put plastic over the top so that in winter it's more like a greenhouse. That's what I'm working on right now. I hate having animals in cages because they can't take care of themselves. You have to provide everything for them in order for them to stay comfortable and healthy. And that's not what we want. We want things to be easy. We want them to be maintenance free. But for rabbits, 100% best compost for your garden. Yes, for those of you who don't know, our feed comes from the Ukraine. Our grain comes from the Ukraine. Our fertilizer comes from Russia. Our fertilizer comes from Russia. And so when we have conflict like this, it is really important to find local people who can provide you with what you need for your home and your family. And if you can't get it locally, stock up on it because you don't know when you'll be able to get it again or what the prices are going to be. Right now, feed stores, which is how I buy my feed stores, my dry goods come in the source of feed for my animals. Feed stores right now are the possibility of price hikes at the end of every month are 100% right now. I just talked to my feed guy, and that's why we're getting one pallet of feed today, is because at the end of the month, the prices are going to hike again, and they don't know how much they're going to hike. And so dry goods for your family, because those can also sometimes be grown overseas and you just don't know. Dry goods for your family, dry goods for your animals, 6 months out, if you have the capacity. Fill your own pantry first. If your pantry is full and you're topped off, get feed for your animals 6 months out. Get it a year out if you can. I know in the South sometimes because of the humidity in the air, you can't store grain, but maybe what you do instead is you have a shed that you put your grain in and you get a dehumidifier and you make it a priority to keep your grain dry. All right, let's see what somebody else said. Tamara said, mix rice with salt to preserve it because we don't have access to the fancy stuff, only buckets and salt. Say it again. Tamara, explain to me what you're saying. Can you explain that a little bit deeper for me? Southern Prairie Homestead said, we are so blessed to have moved to the South in the late 90s. Yes, because property price, even now in the South, property prices are better than they are here. Again, I would love to be in the South right now. Not right now, like being there right now, but like I would love to have a place in the South. I would love to learn how to garden in the South. I would love to make videos about how to garden, how to raise livestock in the South, because it's completely different than it is here. It was totally different for us. We were in Tulsa for 3 years, and we did have livestock while we were there, and I did garden while I was there, and it was a completely different situation than it is here. Somewhere in WTX, what would you grow in the garden to feed Barbados and Brahma mini bulls? What we do, I don't know where, remind me where you are? Texas, somewhere in West Texas. Okay. So your fodder systems are going to be 100% different from mine. I would say have pasture. For us, the fodder that we grow for our extra animal feed is we give them corn stalks at the end of the year. We feed them Swiss chard. We feed them beets. What else do we do? And then we do tree cuttings, but ours are goats. So for cows, you're pretty much stuck to hay. You need pasture for them because they eat that much. You can give them extras like the corn stalks or the beets and things like that, and they will eat them. But if you already have pasture, they're pretty good on pasture. They're meant to eat pasture, have good pasture. Our goats and sheep mostly eat pasture. It's our others are like our more contained animals like the pigs and the rabbits that we grow stuff out of the garden for. The ones that it's a little harder to contain or they're hard on property. Like pigs are hard on pasture, so we don't let them on pasture. We bring garden stuff to them, things like squash. And cows can eat squash. Cows like squash. Our goats like squash, but they're not ready to go until the end of the season. They're not really ready at the beginning of the season. So we keep a year's worth of hay on hand at all times for our herbivores. For our ruminants, I always buy a year's worth of hay in advance. And that way, if pasture's a little light that year, I still have hay to feed them even during the growing season. And then they get snacks. And then they eat a lot of corn stalks at the end of the year. And we feed the pigs and the goats and the rabbits and everybody else on corn stalks. Southern Prairie said, awesome, sell. Yeah, sell clutter for cash. Clutter for cash. Get rid of all your junk that makes you less efficient and bring in stuff that feeds you. And honestly, at this point in time, I'm not holding on to my cash because of what's happening with inflation, with how inflated things are. I am getting real goods. I am not holding, like when I get $1,000 in my little cash envelope from my animals and my homestead, I go get supplies. I don't leave that cash in the envelope because my food needs to be as cheap as it can be. And as inflation goes up, that cash is worth less. Now, am I going out and spending that cash on frivolous things? Am I going out and spending that cash on makeup or on clothes that are not essential or anything like that? No, I am putting it in complete essentials. I'm trying to get a year's worth out on my grain. I'm staying a year ahead out on my hay. And so once a sizable chunk of cash comes in, I'm putting it into food storage. I'm putting it into hay storage. I'm not letting it sit because in a month, that money is worth less than it is today, if I can even get the supplies. Double Blessing said, we still have a bit more than an acre in Northwest Oklahoma for 6,000 raw with trees, could build off or on grid as no code there. I could try to sell to you when here, but you wanted in Eastern Oklahoma. Okay, email me. Double Blessings, please email me. I am so into that. I would definitely talk to John about that. And I would totally be into that. So I'm not even kidding. Double Blessings, please email me. dirtpatcheaven@gmail.com, 1H. Because here it won't let me email you. I don't know what your email address is, so I can't follow up with you very easily. I would totally go for that. Oh my gosh, that would be such a huge blessing. I would seriously cry if we could do that. Okay, Beautiful Homestead said, good morning, watching you from Washington. Do you still book your Airbnb? So my Airbnb is open to book starting in May. And when you're here, you get to learn how to do everything you want to do. So for those of you who are interested in coming and staying on our homestead, once we are in full production, we are still butchering pigs. We're still butchering rabbits. We're building hotbeds. If you want to come stay with us, you can sleep like 8 comfortably in that little Airbnb. And we teach you how to live off grid. We teach you how to use the water pump. We teach you how to do the outdoor shower. We teach you how to do off grid laundry. We teach you how to milk the goats. We teach you how to make cheese. So if you guys are interested in it, I don't know if I have it in the description below, but if you look up Idaho, off-grid tiny cabin, I think you should find it. But after the live stream, I will try to put it in the link in the description below, so that you guys can find it. If you guys are people that want to come and learn how to do all of it, we don't open it until May because it's not pretty until May. Come May, we have grass, but in April, we don't even have grass. It's too cold here. Southern Prairie Homestead said, I agree on the fencing. We have to purchase 3 acres of, oh my gosh, that hurts. 3 acres of fencing very soon. Cow panel fencing has gone up more than barbed wire. Yeah, I love cow panels, but right now they're $33 a piece. So again, I just went and spent $700 on cow panels. And I bought their second ones. So they sold me, the regular retail ones are $33 a piece. I got the ones that are kind of bent up, that are not perfect, and I got those for $13 a piece. I got 3 of them. Oh my gosh, I felt so blessed. I got 2 bundles of T-posts, not the good ones, the crappy ones that are light and not perfectly heavy. Oh my gosh, they're so light. But I have them. And the reason is because I can build greenhouses out of those darn things. I can fence my pigs in, but I can build greenhouses. And I wanted to make sure I had them on hand. But yeah, oh my gosh, that hurts. 3 acres of fencing, that is going to hurt. Southern Prairie Homestead said nitrogen, nitrogen, nitrogen. Yes. So are you talking about gardening, Southern Prairie? So I do use commercial fertilizer in my garden because my soil is so depleted. But this year I have my goat. That's one of the reasons I had to buy fencing last year, was because I wanted to completely fence in my garden so I could put the goats and the sheep in it so that they could keep the weeds down until I was ready to plant, and they could also fertilize it. So that's what we're doing this year. I'm building up my garden. I'm building up my garden. I'm building up my garden. And I'm taking hay to the animals. They're eating hay in the front because there's not grass, but they have to eat hay somewhere anyway. I don't have grass yet. It might as well be in the garden, and it might as well be mulching. If you can keep your ruminants in a small enough space and add carbon, they will actually make your lasagna garden for you so that you don't have to add fertilizer later, and so that there's 0 weeds. So that I have a mob grazed up there right now with hay in order to get it built up quickly. Because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get fertilizer. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get mulch later. And so I'm using my hay that they're eating to mulch while they poop in the garden. All right, let's see. Hickory Croft Farm said, excited to see how your rabbit plans develop. We were thinking something so similar for our grow out rabbits. I would love to see pictures of that. If you want to email me as you build it, I would love to have other ideas from other people. At this point, I'm just thinking of building one long continuous hotbed and lining the inside of the wind side with tin so that they don't have a lot of wind blowing through, but lining the other side with wire so that they can see out. And then just having like a 100-foot long hotbed that they are manuring, and that I'm adding carbon to build that compost up really, really fast. I think it could totally work. I'm just a little tired right now. And because I'm buying so much feed, I don't have money for supplies for more pallets and more tin and that kind of thing. So I'm trying really hard to buy feed and dry goods, since that's what this video is about. And I keep getting deflected. I go off on tangents so much. So dry goods for family first, and then dry goods for animals, and then start working on infrastructure. But first have food for bellies, because we don't know how long, we just don't know what's going to happen next month. We just don't know. And you need to have it on hand. Double Blessing said, Oklahoma has 2 nitrogen fertilizer plants. Buy in bulk, though. Oh, that's a blessing. We have one here too. We have one here. I'm trying to think, is it Simplot? I don't know if they have to buy their raw ingredients though. I know that we've done everything we can permaculture-wise and mulching-wise in our garden to make it as productive as possible. But on top of that, because of how intensively I plant, I also put in slow-release fertilizer beads. And I generally spend probably $60 on fertilizer beads in a year. And I don't have mine purchased yet this year. I just haven't done it. I'm trying to make myself more efficient and more realistic about what I'm doing with my manure for my animals. I'm trying to force myself to find solutions. So what we do for our fertilizer for nitrogen is that we take the bedding from the goats over winter and we put that at the base of fruit trees. It mulches the fruit trees, it feeds the fruit trees, and there's enough of it to cover all of the trees. And then what we use in our gardens is the rabbit manure. Throughout the season, we put ducks underneath all of our fruit trees, and they also add nitrogen. But the trees really need a little bit of mulch to kind of buffer them a little bit because the ducks really do eat down into the dirt quite a bit. And so the mulch and the manure from the goats is really beneficial for the fruit trees. It holds the weeds down for a good part of the season. And then when the weeds do start to come up, the ducks can keep up on it. So nitrogen comes from the goat barn for the fruit trees. Nitrogen comes for the fruit trees from the ducks later in the season. And the nitrogen for the gardens comes from the rabbits. One reason for that is because the rabbits don't have parasites. The rabbits are in cages up off the ground. They are parasite free. So I'm not adding parasites to my garden by adding rabbit manure. If I added goat manure that was straight out of the goat shed, they are grazing on the grass. They're in contact with the soil. They do have parasites. Not a lot of parasites. And if I were to compost my goat manure, if I were to turn it every day and get it really hot and really compost it down, it wouldn't have parasites in it then. But I don't physically have that kind of work in me. I have to do things easier. I can't lift heavy loads. It makes me sick. My body can't handle that kind of labor anymore. So, sorry, I'm trying to stay focused. Southern Prairie Homestead said in 2008, 50 pounds of white winter wheat was $8, now $45. I know, is that crazy? Oh my gosh. Well, even just last year, a bag of scratch feed, like the pretty lovely scratch feed that you get at retail stores, was $13. It's now $17. That was last year. And that's just animal feed. That's not even people feed. Thinking of Others said, friends, please note how she reuses everything they're able to. Try to use everything more than once. Yeah, that's the big thing, is redundancy in purpose. Again, dry goods, if you can get them in the form of seeds instead of in the form of ground, you can actually plant them. It's important to know where your food comes from and what different forms you can get your food in, because then you can use them in so many different ways. Okay, Southern Prairie Homestead said, I missed it. Where did it go? Southern Prairie Homestead said, South gardening is a learning curve. I got knowledge from an old timer and still have issues. When we did our gardening in Tulsa, the first thing we did was get chickens. And the reason for that was because they had honeysuckle and all sorts of nasty weeds in the backyard. And so we had ducks and we had chickens. And we fenced that in. It was a very tiny little fence. I'll try and see if I can find that video and show it to you guys. So we had free-range chickens in the backyard, and they ate all of the weeds, zero weeds, and we put mulch down as they ate the weeds. So the mulch that we used was dry leaves that we went and collected from other people's property, and then we had a tree company that came and dumped sawdust for us. And so every time that the chickens ate the weeds, we'd put more sawdust down so they weren't in a mud pit, because there's a lot of rain in Tulsa. And we built a hotbed. We built a high hotbed, and we used leaves from people's yards to fill the hotbed. And so our first garden, we started it in February in Tulsa, and we had ice storms and freezing weather and all kinds of things, but the hotbed was fine. And we grew basil and tomatoes and peppers and stuff in the hotbed, and they were fine, even though we had ice storms. And as long as the birds were in the backyard eating and laying eggs and doing their thing, we had zero weeds in the backyard and we could garden. I left for like 3 weeks. I had to come back to Idaho, And for business reasons, John was still in Tulsa. And so we sold the ducks and we sold the chickens because I was going to be back and forth too much. In the 3 weeks it took for me to get to Idaho and come back, we had honeysuckle and weeds covering that backyard. And so having, even though it's way different from here where we deal with so much cold and everything, the livestock made a huge difference in our garden. And I used the manure from the ducks and the geese, or no, the ducks and the chickens in the hotbed. That's how I heated it up. We also had some rabbits hanging in the carport. It was not pretty, but it worked. I never gardened there in the summer, though. I don't know what, I mean, I gardened there in the winter. It was a completely different thing. But the ducks and the chickens made a massive difference because I didn't have to fight all those horrible weeds. And I never actually planted anything in the ground there. Everything I did was some kind of raised bed because it was a rental and I wanted to make sure I wasn't making holes in things. All right, Cheryl said, have been sourcing grains, etc. for the last 3 years to eat and grow. Always learning every day. Thank you for your inspiration over the last few years. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're finding things local. My local guy that I was buying grain from, his whole supply of wheat for the year got wet. And so what I was planning on buying for the rest of the year, 2 or 3 more totes, got wet. And so I had, as of yesterday, I had to reallocate more money because it was going to be more expensive to buy at retail. But even though I had to reallocate an extra $100 for feed than what I was planning on for 1 ton of feed, today I'm still buying feed. Even though the price went up, it's better to have it than to sit here and wring my hands, be like, oh my gosh, feed went up. It's so terrible. Instead of being able to find it locally, I'm going to have to buy it retail, but I need to have it. So that's what I'm doing. Southern Prairie Homestead said, change the wheat berries just got higher in $52. Wow. Yeah. Find local people if you can. My local guy, all his wheat got destroyed. Darn it. Southern Prairie Homestead said, I used to make my own all-purpose flour, getting ready for reality to come back because of supply and cost. Yep. We used to have a wheat grinder, and we tried all sorts of different grains to make our own flours once we couldn't have wheat. But for us, we can't have the flour of anything in the air. The girls can eat some of it, but not a lot of it. And so, again, most of our food, one of the reasons we do a homestead is because we can't eat food storage. If we didn't grow our own food, we wouldn't have food storage because of our limitations in diet. Beautiful Homestead said 50-pound bag of wheat, barley, or oats are $10. Oh my gosh, that's way better than here. Okay, everybody hear that? 50-pound bags of wheat, barley, or oats are $10 in Oregon at Cameron Jewett Grain Mill, 30 miles from her in Washington. Oh my gosh. So for those of you in that area, that is a huge savings. We are at $17, almost $20 a bag for any wheat, any barley, any oats. We are at $17 a bag for scratch feed and $20 a bag for regular single grain food. And then you're looking at almost $30 a bag for any kind of mixed feed. So thank you, Beautiful Homestead, for saying that. So for any of you who are close to there, that is a phenomenal price. I wish I could get it for that. That would save me $7 a bag right now if I could get it. There are other feed mills around us, but they're at such a distance that for us, the gas prices right now would mean that we would break even. So up in Territon and Mud Lake, there's Stockman Supply. So if you guys are in Idaho, maybe this is helpful. Stockman Supply up in Territon, they're selling it for less money. I think it's like 18 cents a pound or something. However, the gas or the diesel that it would cost to get us up there and back would negate any savings. And so it's as cheap for us to buy it here locally at a feed store. Yogi Hollow Farm said, hello, hello, hello. Here for the first time. Well, welcome. I'm all over the place. I was supposed to be talking about dry goods and I've gone off into homesteading as I always do. So I'll say it again. Split peas are fantastic. If instead you can get something that has not been split, like these mung beans, they haven't been split. And so you can use them to sprout. You can grow them in your garden or you can cook them. But the more you can get something that is not been denatured, something that still has its germ intact, you can also use your food storage for garden seeds. Get your own pantry full of food for your family with dry goods. And for those of you who missed it, I'll show you again. We have, when we get a 50-pound bag or 25-pound bag of something, we put them in Ziplocs, and then we put them in a 5-gallon bucket. And that way, when the kids need to go downstairs to get food storage, they can grab a Ziploc. They're not spilling food on the ground that would attract mice. If this was sugar, it would, and it got spilled, it would attract ants. So by having it in dual packaging, when you get a really big one, a lot of times when it comes in the big bags, it's in a paper bag, which a paper bag, if it gets wet, everything is lost, or a mouse can chew through it. But inside this, and then inside this, a mouse can't get into it, bugs can't get into it. And then for other dry good things, I like to use just regular glass jars. Not fancy, they just were whatever was in them before. It now has food storage. I like glass better than plastic. But for dry goods, you can use plastic, and the square ones are fantastic. I don't buy these on purpose to get these containers. They're just what John has on hand because he snacks a lot on nuts, and so we use them. Get single ingredients, not pre-mixed things, because then you can take single ingredients and mix them together to make multiple things instead of just having one thing. For instance, granola. Get your fruit and your oats and your nuts and keep them separate, and then just make your granola when you're ready. It saves you money, but it also allows you to have more variety of things you can make. Get bulk spices, because a lot of these things that are bulk items, they don't have a lot of flavor in themselves. So bulk spices. Keep the majority of your food storage cool by having it in a basement or underneath your bed. Do not store your bulk storage in your hot kitchen. Heavy things should go under beds, not up in closets. And if you have Rubbermaid totes that fit under your bed, so you put all your food storage in, put the lid on, slide it under your bed, use it as you need it. And then, even though this is not a dry good, get concentrates. Instead of buying, this is an old ragu jar. Somebody corrected me. I called it pragu, prago or something. This was originally spaghetti sauce. Mostly water. It would be mostly water. If instead you get tomato paste, you just add water and spices, and you can make, honey, take him back out, please. And then go out with him so he'll be quiet, okay? With this, all you need is spices and some water, and you can have either tomato soup, you can have tomato sauce, you can have enchilada sauce, you can have pizza sauce, you can make everything out of tomato paste because it is concentrated, and all you have to do is add water and spices. So I keep a year's worth of this on hand. And then salt. You want salt because you can preserve vegetables and you can preserve meat by having salt. So I keep 100 pounds of salt on hand, different kinds of salt. Actually, I have cheese salt for when I make cheese. I have kimchi salt for when I make kimchi. I have Himalayan salt. I have iodized salt. I have uniodized salt. I have a lot of salt because if the refrigeration went out, I could take all my pork and I could salt it and I could smoke it. And if I had vegetables that I needed to be able to get fermented, I need salt in order to be able to do that. So there's a recap on what we're talking about. And when you have garden supplies and they're dehydrated, also they can go in jars. If you're in the South, you probably want to put oxygen absorbers in all of your jars. And then if I have anything that is a flour source, if I have something that's flour, I put it in the freezer because once you crush the germ, it starts to go rancid immediately. So keep your flours in the freezer. All right, Southern Prairie Homestead said over the last 4 days, prices have jumped huge on Azure Standard. Yes, any bulk mass commodity is going to go up. Even if you can source it, the price of fuel is going to make everything go up because farmers have to still be able to go plow their fields and they have to be able to harvest, and they run on diesel. And fertilizer has gone up, and so get it now. As inflation goes up, your dollar, what you can buy, not only is inflation going up, but supply is going down. It's harder to get things because our travel conduits, our grid that is our food supply is at times under duress. And so instead of thinking about food storage at this point, get it. Get your food storage. Once you have your own food storage, get your food storage for your animals and get it now. again, once I have a sizable chunk of money, like $500, I go buy what I need. I just spent $700 on fence panels. Today, I'm spending $700 on feed. And a few days ago, I went and spent, what did I get? No, that must have been, I had saved the money to go buy wheat, but then my farmer didn't have it. So I have your garden seeds. When you can buy dry goods that are seeds, do it because you can use them as seeds, but also go buy your other garden seeds that you can't use as food. Main Street Seed and Supply, mainstreetseedandsupply.com is where I get my garden seeds in bulk. I buy them by the pound. I do not buy them by the little paper packet. I buy them by the pound because with the hotbeds, I can grow all year round. I can grow my vegetables all year. And so I buy them in pounds. I have 3 apple boxes full of garden seeds. And that's the kind of bulk you have to buy your garden seeds in if you're actually going to produce enough food for your family to eat and then have enough for next year. And I'm trying to be really careful to buy only one type of each plant so that I can save seed. If I plant 3 different types of peas, when I want to save those peas for seed, I'm going to get a weird pea. If instead I'll plant one type of pea in that spot and one type of pea in that spot and one type of pea in that spot, I can save and still have true seeds from each spot. Or to make it simple on myself, I could just plant one type of pea. And then when they dry out, I can use them for seed for later. But this year I'm also focusing very hard on saving my seed because even though I buy it in bulk, I get really tired of spending money. It would be much smarter if I were just to save my own seed. Thank you, Double Blessing. Okay. And Double Blessing, I don't know how to do that. Did you want me to actually like remove your name from like the feed? I didn't. I'm a little bit far behind on my comments, so I don't know if you left your email here or not. But I will try to figure out how to do that, Double Blessing. I'm not very good at this. Not my strong point. Okay, Color Drop said, hi, Lisa. Yogi said, hi to somebody else. Southern Prairie Farms had said, yes, gardening, I need nitrogen for the onions to get big. Dr. Earth Nitro, big high nitrogen plant food stocking up. I'll have to look into that. I've never heard of that one. Dr. Earth. I think I have some of their planting, their seed starter. I'll have to go look into that because I've never heard of that one. Dr. Earth, okay. Yeah, my onions never get big enough. I'm not very good at it. Onions are not my strong point. Yogi Hollow Farm said feed is off the chain with prices. We ordered pig feed and in less than 2 weeks. It went up by $2 a bag. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. If you have cash, put it into feed. Put it into food storage. Put it into supplies that you need for your farm if you've already done the other two. There's nothing wrong with having savings. I do not think there's anything wrong with having savings and having some on hand. But you can't eat money. Swamp Acre Homestead. Hey, how are ya? King's Karen said, what is a homestead hog breed? So a homestead hog, they were smaller and they have a tendency to be fat and small and slow growing. And there's a lot of different varieties you can get with that. The ones that we really like is a combination of Julianne. It's a Chinese pig. If you've ever seen like a teacup pig, those are like the nasty overbred version. Julianne pigs are more of a small hog. They look kind of like a rat, or more like a wild pig. A Julianne looks more like a wild pig, like what you have in Texas. And so we have a 3-way. It's a Julianne, Kune, American Guinea Hog. We're kind of thinking we want less of the American Guinea Hog in our cross because they make you a little. They're kind of like a Cornish cross hen in that they gain so much weight so quickly on just a little bit of feed that they get really fat and they like break their legs. Whereas with the Kune and the Julianne, they can eat more without like incapacitating themselves. So that's the 3-way that we have right now. We really, really like them. Mangalinsa is also kind of considered a heritage hog, but they eat more and they're harder on fences than my pigs are. They're bigger. They get up to like 350, 400 pounds. I mean, they can get really big. whereas my pigs, they kind of top out at about 150 pounds. And so they're very easy for me to feed. They're very easy for me to butcher. They're very easy for me to move. For a woman who farms, my husband does not farm. It's very nice for me to have a small pig. It grows slow, but I can feed it out of the garden. We had 8 pigs this year through the winter, and it cost me like $100 to feed them all winter. Because they could eat food scraps. They didn't need high protein food. And they're just easy keepers. Slow to grow, so I don't have to worry about needing to butcher them the minute that they hit like 5-6 months old. Color Drop said, what are the best plants to grow to feed rabbits? I just planted comfrey and sunflowers, and we also have a mulberry tree. Oh, they love mulberry trees. So what I grow for my rabbits is Swiss chard because it doesn't bolt in the summer. It's a great green, kind of like spinach, but in heat, it doesn't bolt. You cut it, it comes again. You cut it, it comes again. It's very hardy. It's very pest-free. So Swiss chard is my big go-to. If you're in the South, sweet potato greens. They can live 100% off of sweet potato greens without commercial feed. Sweet potato greens are very high in protein. And then I grow sunflowers for them, for the sunflowers themselves, not for the stalks. They won't eat the stalks unless they're starving. But we also feed them the stalks from corn in the fall. We feed them squash. Pretty much the only thing we don't feed the rabbits is nightshade plants. Everything else we cut bindweed for them. We cut twigs from trees for them. We give them greens of all kinds. We don't give them roots because of parasites. The one time we had coccidiosis and lost a baby was because we'd given him a beet. And instead of cutting beet greens off, we gave him the whole thing. And he did get coccidiosis from it. And that's the only time we've had that happen. So we don't give roots to our rabbits. Learning Curve Acres. Hey, how's it going? All right. Swampy Acres Homestead said, our last frost here in Pennsylvania is not till May. Yeah, we can plant in May, but our last frost is the end of June. That's when our last frost is, about June 28th. You can plant in May, but we still have to cover everything. So I plant things like beets and peas and things like that in April. And I plant potatoes in April, and then I cover them with a milk jug so that they are not freezing. Let's see. Southern Prairie Homestead said, I planted a pigeon peas tree. Amazing production. Amazed how fast it grows. I'm not familiar with the pigeon pea tree. I'll have to look that up. Southern Prairie Homestead said, I purchased a Como, the best grind, but pricey. We've had multiple kinds of grinders, and I kind of wish I still had mine, but our problem is with our food issues. When the flour puffs up in the air a little bit, it makes me really sick. So we just stopped pretending that we could do it, and we sold it and haven't really looked back. It would be nice if I could grind my grain, but for my animals, but it's not a possibility, I'm afraid. Yogi Hollow, so thank you for the welcome. Our pallet of pig feed is an hour away. Gas cost is now almost $19 a bag. It was $14 a bag in 2020. That's crazy. So do you guys have pigs that don't eat a huge? We were in that exact same position last year before we found our current pigs. We were doing a commercial pig, paying massive amounts. Our pig feed is $24 a bag. Here, if you buy pig feed, it's $24 a bag, between $24 and $29, depending on which one you get. Pardon me. And so when we were raising commercial pigs and they wouldn't eat any of our homestead produce, we had to be very fast about raising those pigs. We couldn't let them get old. We had to feed them quickly and move on to butcher now, because in the end we were spending like $30, maybe $50 a week on feed. So expensive. And so when we found these other pigs and they could just live on squash, we got breeders. We got 8 of them. We wanted to make sure that we had breeders, because the lady that we got them from decided to get out of pigs. She wasn't going to raise them anymore. She was raising them on commercial feed, and she couldn't afford to do it. And they didn't look good at her place because the pigs did not do well on commercial feed. They either got way too fat where she could only give them a tiny amount, and then they got too skinny. So we brought them here. We saw how fast they grew on squash and Swiss chard and beets. We went and bought more babies, And now we have 2 boars and 2 gilts, hopefully pregnant. And the reason that we got into breeders was because we wanted to make sure we didn't lose this particular mix because they worked so well. And now we can feed them. We had 8 pigs, $100, fed them over the winter. And then we sold our extras and made all of our feed money back fourfold. So having the right genetics and being able to feed them efficiently, genetics, it matters so much. That being said, I did not spend $500 a pig. I traded them for a sheep because she didn't want the babies. So I have a $15 sheep that I'm raising on goat's milk right now that I'm going to take to her at the end of the year in exchange for these 4 babies that she gave me for free. I didn't spend any money on them. So I didn't go spend $500 a piece on expensive breeding stock. I did not do that. I got free babies. If I didn't do that, there's no way that my homestead could pay for itself. If I was spending that much on little baby breeding stock, if you buy really expensive breeding stock, babies, you've got a year before you find out if they're even fertile. They're a year old before you breed them, and then you breed them, and you've got 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days to see if those pigs are going to have babies. If she turns out to be a bad mom, you've now got more than a year into that pig. And since you spent $300 on that baby pig, you don't feel like you can afford to eat her. So even if she's a bad breeder, you don't want to put her in the freezer because you spent $300 on her. That is the trap you can get into in homesteading, is magic bullet purchases. Oh, this animal is such great genetics, it's going to change my homestead. I can afford to spend $300 on it. No, you can't. I did that this year with a sheep that turned out to be not a ewe, but a wether. The nice thing is that the guy I got it from is a good guy. He recognized that it was his mistake, and so he reimbursed me the money for that sheep. But it meant I was a whole year behind on getting a new ewe because we needed another sheep. So I had to go get baby lambs. I have bum lambs on goats now, so we have 2 new ewes coming into the flock, and that'll be fantastic. Not having to raise bum lambs anymore. But that was a very quick draw decision I had to make of, I spent too much on an animal. I can't afford to put that animal in the freezer. That was dumb. Get my money back, go get baby lambs really fast so that I have sheep for next year. It was very hectic, and it's why I look like I'm tired, is because of trying to make all those decisions. Sorry, I'll try and get back to your questions. Okay, Joe said, cool info on the mung beans. See them at the local health food store. Yeah, you can sprout them and you can cook them. I don't recommend getting them in small bags unless you have to. Get them in bulk. Well, first, go get them from the health food store and cook them and see if you like to eat them. If you don't like to eat them, don't buy them. Don't buy something just because it stores. So mung beans, you can sprout them, and they're a big thing in Chinese and Asian cuisine. The mung beans that you eat in Asian cuisine come from this. But you can also plant the seeds and turn it into mung beans that you eat as green, or that you then harvest the seeds and turn them into more mung beans. So before you go buy food stores, make sure that you have bought a small amount of it and tried it at home to see if you like the flavor. And yeah, go get it in small bags at the health food store or something. Spend a couple dollars. But at this point in time, start cooking from scratch. Cook from scratch. Do not buy. This is the most convenience food that we have, is our flours that the girls can use in their cooking. This is our convenience food. We do not buy convenience food. We buy bulk. But we don't buy bulk in anything that we don't like to eat. So starting now, don't buy pre-made things. Buy bulk. Try it out in small. I need to stop saying that. Buy it in small packages. Try it out. See if you like to eat it. If you like to eat it, go buy it in bulk. Put it in Ziploc bags. Put it in a 5-gallon bucket. Seal it. Put it in your food storage. Put it under your bed. Put it in your pantry. Don't store your food storage in your hot kitchen. Put it under your bed. Put it in your pantry. All right. Life begins with a seed. We save our square nut containers. Yeah, I love these containers. They fit into my cupboards so well, and I have so many of them. I don't put them in the dishwasher because it melts them, but I don't really need to wash them because all they had in them were dry goods. We're just putting more dry goods in them. Let's see. Southern Prairie Homestead said, I keep losing it. Oh, how far did it go? Oh, how far did it go? Okay. Okay, Vivian King said, thanks for sharing of Main Street Seeds. Just placed an order. So much information. I have to go back and watch again. Thanks. You're welcome. So those of you who missed it, Main Street Seed and Supply is where I get my seeds for my garden. They don't have a massive breadth of seeds. They have like maybe 6 varieties of each type, but they sell them by the pound for like $6. So you can get 2 years worth of seeds for like $30. And I get them by multiple pounds. I do not buy the little package. And so when I make like a year's worth of seed orders, it costs like, less than $80 if I get everything I want. And I have 3 apple boxes full of garden seeds, and they're great seeds. The only mistake we've had is one year I planted watermelon and it came up as winter squash, but the pigs were happy, so who cares? But that's the only mistake I've found, is that one little, but maybe I didn't need watermelon that year. Maybe I needed winter squash to feed the pigs. So Southern Prairie Homestead said, I vacuum seal flour in paper bags and will last 3 years. That's amazing. That is amazing. But didn't you say you also have a wheat grinder? So yours is probably fresher too. Joe said, Julianne is so cool. I came in at 2 hours, definitely watching her replay for the first part. I'm sorry it's at 2 hours, guys. I talk too much, but it'll be over in a week and a half. So the rest of the things that I have that I want to talk about. Tomorrow I want to talk about buckets, jars, plastic. I kind of talked about it today, but I want to talk about it more tomorrow. The next one is water storage, and after that is food allergies, and then fermentation, and then freezers, and then smokehouse, and then seasonings, and then fat and oil. I should probably bring fat and oil higher up on the list because that's a big one. If you have pigs, you don't need to worry about fat and oil, at least if you have homestead hogs. Commercial hogs are not real fatty, and so you don't get a lot of fat on them. You have a lot of lean. We don't really like that kind of meat. We really like it to have a lot of fat on it. And we don't have to buy butter. We don't have to buy cooking oil. Lard is so nice. Our lard is really nice. We don't feed them soy. Okay. Thank you very much, Joe. Southern Prairie Homestead said there is a diesel fuel shortage manufactured by politicians. So I definitely think that fuel is a thing right now. Fuel is a thing right now. And if you have dry goods and if you have food storage in your house, then needing to be able to still put fuel into your car or into your truck will not hurt as much because you know that your food is already taken care of. It gives you so much more wiggle room, and it helps you make good decisions down the road about what you're going to do for your family because you're not afraid of whether or not you have food for them. So the fuel thing is super not fun. It is super not fun. And it is less frightening when you have food storage. So fill your own pantry first, and then fill up your animal's pantry, and then go get infrastructure that you need for your garden. That's what I think. Because if we're not afraid, we make better decisions about what we're doing with our politicians. Isn't that true? Grandma Ginger Farm said, what do you use for parasite control of the goats? I wonder if I have some in here. I use Herbal Worm Formula System by Molly's Herbs. I also keep diatomaceous earth on hand, and that's for the cats and the dogs. And that's what I do for the goats. Once a year, right after they kid, I do use commercial dewormer, just once. And then the rest of the time, I give them the Molly's Herbal stuff. And it's actually stuff you can make at home. It's wormwood and black walnut and garlic, and it's a pretty simple formula. I wonder if I can read it to you from here. Where is the ingredients? Oh, it doesn't have it on this particular paper, but yeah, it has wormwood and black walnut. But for our other animals that are not milk producing or stuff like that, like for the cats, we will mix diatomaceous earth with milk and give it to them periodically when it looks like they need it. And we don't worm the rabbits because they're not in contact with the soil. And that's what we do. Okay, Southern Prairie Homestead said, Julianne, how is Main Street germination rate? Fantastic. It germinates. They have good young seed that comes out. They germinate perfect. As long as they get the right seed in the package for your watermelons. I swear I planted watermelons but either they, they might have frosted, but I'm pretty sure. Anyway, the ones that came up that were supposed to be watermelons were little white acorn type squash, and the pigs loved them. And that's the only time it's happened. And I've been ordering from them for like 5 years. I just wasn't meant to grow watermelons. Joe said, I wasn't familiar with whole broad beans until a YouTuber I'm subbed to told me to check out Central Market, where produce comes into the city, and bingo. Besides, I hear they have pretty flowers as well. Broad beans. That's fava. Is that the same as fava beans? I have planted fava beans, and they are beautiful. And I really like to put them at the base of my trees because it tells me if the trees are distressed. A lot of times if you put a nitrogen fixer like a bean at the base of your new fruit trees, it'll tell you if it's getting enough water or enough fertilizer or not, because it'll change colors according to whether or not it has enough water or fertilizer. So I would plant fava beans at the base of my new fruit trees and watch the health of the fava beans to tell me what I needed to change for the tree. Because the fava bean will be in distress before the tree is. Southern Prairie Homestead said, onion needs nitrogen every week. Wow, I had no idea. Onions need nitrogen every week. The more leaves, the better. Each leaf is a ring. More leaves, bigger onions. I am so glad you told me that. I had no idea. I plant onions and I get onions, but they're never massive. Southern Prairie Homestead said, gave up on zucchini vine borers. Yeah, in the South, that's what I understand, is that it's very difficult to grow squash in the South when you get bugs like that. For us, we don't have that kind of thing here, but we do have grasshoppers and other things. And I found that turkeys, once your produce in the garden is about knee high, you don't want it lower than that because then they'll eat the plants themselves. But turkeys don't scratch like a chicken. And they love Swiss chard and they love grasshoppers. And so for our family, what we do is we have the garden fenced in. And once our produce is at knee high, we take the turkeys out there and they eat all of the bad bugs. And I don't know what they would think of something like a vine borer or if they'd even be able to access that. But we found that the turkeys could be in with strawberries. The turkeys could be in with squash. They could be in with tomatoes, and they won't bother the plants, but they'll eat the bugs out of the plants. What they will eat is the Swiss chard. They love Swiss chard and kale. They love kale. They love Swiss chard. And if there's a lot of it planted, they won't hurt it. They'll just nibble on it and go along and nibble on it. But if you only have one patch of Swiss chard or one patch of kale, they'll go through and they'll just eat it. They'll eat it from the top down. And which doesn't really matter with Swiss chard because Swiss chard, it's cut and come again. So I think that's why it's a blessing they love the Swiss chard, is because as they eat the Swiss chard down, it just grows back. We loved the turkeys. The struggle with the turkeys is that they start to fly at one point and they'll clear fences and stuff. And our garden is up by the road. We didn't want turkeys out in our road. You know what I mean? Okay. Desert Frost Farms. My last Friday is March 15th-ish. I'm way behind getting my garden going. Oh, wow. Does that mean your last frost? My last frost is March 15th. I know ours isn't until the end of June. And so we have to have greenhouses and hotbeds and that kind of thing. Desert Frost Farms. What a pretty name. Tamara Doughton said, I pay rent. Would you save money to cover expenses like rent as a mortgage for a couple months as a safety net? I would if I already have my food storage. Definitely. I think that's a great idea because rent is stable. Rent is straight across the board. They can't raise rent on you unexpectedly. You have to have some notice if they're going to raise rent. So that's if you have something that you need to save money for that is going to be static, that's not going to change, it can't change quickly, then yeah, save money for that. Like for a mortgage, save money for a mortgage because your mortgage is going to be flat. They can't suddenly increase your mortgage payment on you. And so that's something we're saving money for. What's not worth saving money for is buying food storage in the future. If you need food storage, buy it now because you don't know what that food price is going to be in a month. Those commodities, your perishable commodities, are going like this. For one thing, just because of fuel prices, but also because of availability. So anything that's a commodity that's perishable, the prices are going like this. Something with rent or mortgage, it stays like this. And so, yeah, it's worth saving money for because your dollar's worth as much as it was last month as far as for rent. So, yeah, very good point. Joe Serrano said, I used to see you at Jason. Oh, Okay, so you guys are talking about something else. Southern Prairie said, yes, I grind my spelt weekly in hard wheat. Yeah, I think you're brilliant. Good job. Okay, Joe said, kudos to you. That reminds me of my Aunt Grace. She buys wheat berries in bulk, central Utah, and boils the wheat. Yummy. Yeah, we used to eat that when I was a kid before we knew we were allergic to wheat. That's what we do with our pig food. We buy whole grains wheat. We were buying local organic wheat. And that's what we do in the winter. We put the pig food on the wood stove, we cook it on the wood stove, and then we feed it to the pigs. We don't feed it to them raw and hard because it just goes through their digestive system and they can't get anything out of it. So we cook it in the winter. Let's see. Southern Prairie says she just bought a 50-pound bag of diatomaceous earth so that she can't run out. I think that's a great thing. We bought like a 5-pound bag years ago, and we still have a lot of it left. A little bit goes a really long way with diatomaceous earth. All right, tomorrow we'll see you. I'm gonna go too. Looks like we're at 2.5 hours. That's a long talk. Southern Prairie said, I lost 27 tomato plants with the frost, germinated some, replaced. We'll see how long. Yeah, I need to go out and plant my tomatoes today in the greenhouse. Learning Curvaker says, so if onions need lots of nitrogen, would they do really well planted in rabbit manure? I would probably, what I have found is that plants like a lot of nitrogen. Instead of planting them in the rabbit manure, I mulch with the rabbit manure around the plant, and that way every time I water, a little bit of the nitrogen goes down into the soil. I do sometimes mix the rabbit manure into the potting soil, but it's really strong nitrogen if you plant directly into rabbit manure. Not many things will survive if you plant it directly into rabbit manure. You need to mix it in with some potting soil or use the rabbit manure as mulch so that there's a break from all that intense fertilizer. Yogi Hollow Farm said, have a great day, everyone. Glad I found your channel. Thank you. Yes, I am heading out. Okay, I'm going to go take care of my family. Thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in listening to my Brain Dump Everyday Solutions, that's on Patreon. And tomorrow we are talking about, probably we'll talk about water storage and hand pumps and that kind of thing. So, love you guys. And make sure to share any videos that you feel really strongly about. Don't share all of them, only things you really care about. Hey, Watchman, thank you so much for helping. That was awesome. And so, okay, I'm going to head out. Thanks for all the comments, and we'll talk to you later.